We're live. All right, welcome everyone to the Verona Borough Workshop Meeting for February 22nd, 2022. Please stand for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we'll take roll call. Christine, are you available to take roll? Or do you want me to do it? Oh.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sorry, the volume was down.
Okay. Dave Matlin,
Present.
Joey Warren,
Present.
Reese Suchovich,
Present.
Leah Provenza,
Present.
Chris Redzak Showalter,
Present.
Vince Sloda,
Is Vince on via Zoom?
He's not
He's
showing.
going to Zoom. Vince, you there?
No, if he comes into chambers, we'll let you know and update the record.
Great. Rhoda Wharf,
Present.
David Recupero,
Present.
Christine DeRunk, present.
Your voice,
All right.
Yeah,
it's pretty bad at times,
Yeah, I don't know what the.
like getting feedback or something.
either that or maybe get away a little bit from the microphone.
She presents, we can maybe.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Christine. At this time, are there from members of council or mayor any emergency additional agenda items? All right. So at this time, council will hear comments from the public on agenda related items only. Please approach the podium or raise your virtual hand. Clearly state your name and address and limit your comment to 3 minutes. Do we have any comments?
I'm looking online and we have no hands raised at this moment. And we have no one in the
Nothing
public
in-
audience.
okay.
approaching.
All right. The next item, discussion items from advisory boards and commissions. There are no agenda items for them. Discussion items. The first one is aesthetics of website rebuild, presented by Christine DeRunk.
So I'm going to share my screen. And just need to find it because I have multiple screens here. All right, so are you able to see something that looks like a new website?
Yes, purple
Yes.
band across a white screen with cursive lettering.
Perfect. Okay, so I have been working with GovUnity, our contracted consultant, to rebuild the website. And they have actually created 4 mock-ups of home pages, and you all are invited to participate in the process. When I say you all, I mean council and mayor. So I'm going to share a link to a survey with you after this meeting, but I just wanted to kind of show you how that works and give you the lay of the land so that you know what you're doing should you choose to participate in providing some feedback. If you would like to participate in this survey, then please respond by Thursday. So the link is going to bring you to this page that says survey design. And then you'll notice, can you see my cursor?
Yes.
Okay, so there's a home 1, a home 2, a home 3, and a home 4. And when you click on those, they take you to, they're going to open up additional tabs. And so home 1, did it change for you all? Or is there still a lag? you see 6 yellow boxes now?
Yes.
Great. So this is what mock-up number 1 looks like. And we don't need to go through the gory details. I'm just showing you how the survey works so that you have some context for when you do it, should you choose to. And then there's home 2, and you'll see it looks a little different. Still sticking with the purple and gold theme with our logo. There's home 3, which has, another very different look. And then of course, home 4. And all they did was pulled images from our current website, and they wanted to give us a chance to give some feedback about what we like and don't like. So, so those are the 4 options that you're going to be looking at should you choose to do the survey. And then these questions, like this one's just the header layout. Which one do you like best of home 1, 2, 3, or 4? And then there's an image here on the left that tells you what's the header. What are you looking at on these 4 mock-ups? And let's say I really like home 3 the best, and I like home 2, and then home 4, and then home 2 is last. You just put your cursor on them and drag them around, and you just rank them basically. And then you can go to the next question about just the logo. So the one with kind of script looking, and this one's very neat looking, that's just in the image. And again, you can just drag the things around based on what you like and based on your preferences. So you can just go through those questions and rank them if you want to participate. The only one that's a little bit weird, and I call your attention to, is this menu structure one, because there's a 5th option. So let me show you what that looks like. When you're on this is just home 1, and you go to government and hover over it, then it's going to do the pop-up show up for you?
Yes.
Perfect. So the menu looks like this. Under government, it looks like that. Under services. And then you can do the same thing for home 2, only it looks a little different because this time it's in all caps to match the header. And you can do that for home 1, 2, 3, and 4. But then there's also a 5th option that's on the survey page itself. So when you go to government here, it kind of gives it in these 2 columns. When you go to services, it's in 2 columns. And so then when you answer that question, number 3, you have 5 options, and you can just, drag those around as you see fit. And then once you finish it, there's a comment section down here. You can feel free to, add in whatever you think about these different options, or maybe you like to mix and match if you have any ideas about that, you want to give some input, and then be sure to hit submit. So it's pretty exciting. Things are actually like getting built. It's happening. It really is coming. And if you want to participate in this, feel free to do again by Thursday. Are there any questions before I go to the next item?
Now, you want these by end of day Thursday, though, for anyone that does want to take the online survey?
Yes, please.
And the link is in our inboxes?
It'll be there after the meeting. I don't want to email during the meeting, but it'll be there right after the meeting.
So just to be, you're looking for the responses to the survey by Thursday, correct?
Yes, yes, to complete. If members of council or the mayor choose to participate in this survey, please complete the survey by dragging the home 1, 2, 3, 4 around by Thursday.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. And I believe the next item is another one you'll be presenting, Christine, the full width paving ordinance.
Yes. So this particular one, I got a copy of what Harmer just did relatively recently. I think it's within the last year, related to full width paving. And this is just a reminder that First Street is supposed to be basically torn up later this year in June. So council will just need to decide if it's interested in adopting an ordinance that would effectively require those who dig up the roads, particularly, for new roadways, if it would require them to, repair it so that we don't end up with bumpy roads that are brand new. I did not go through this particular sample ordinance to compare it to things we already have on the books or to check whether it's, related to what we have, basically whether it's consistent. I'm just trying to gauge, is council interested in this kind of thing? If so, then it seems we should put together a list of questions for Matt, because he's going to be the one to really be able to speak to some of this as the borough engineer. And then we would, of course, if we decide to adopt something like this, we would need to ensure it's consistent with our current ordinances, our current fee structure, the permit application itself, just sort of all of that to make it thoughtful and consistent. So I don't know if y'all had a chance to read this, and if you have any thoughts on it that you wanted me to document and take questions to Matt.
Yeah, Christine, before we get started, if you're done with the screen share of the website, you can. Pull
Oh
that
yeah,
down
sorry. Sorry, I forgot that was.
and I do have questions I put together, so I don't know if tonight's the time or if you just want to understand if we'd be in favor. I am in favor of it, and I do have feedback. So if you're going to take all the questions, it's kind of the funnel to get to Matt. I do have some I'd like to provide that I can just email or discuss if that's how we want to go.
I think it's imperative that we do this, though. I think it's very important to do this.
So
Well, I want to say that I'm present. I had issues getting online.
okay, thanks, Vince. So yeah, Christine let the record show that Vince Flota is currently present to the meeting. So as far as, yeah, I went through the Harmer ordinance, and I went through the Harmer ordinance in detail. I didn't go through our, we have a streets and sidewalks street opening permit regulation ordinance that was adopted in 2014. And I skimmed through that, and a lot of the language is a lot of similar language and a lot of the same things in there. I think this just makes it a little tougher and requires the full width paving for certain conditions that our existing ordinance doesn't. So I'm in favor of pursuing it. I don't think it would be a heavy lift for Matt to just look through the Harmer one, which he's already familiar with, I believe, and as well as our current ordinance, which he may also be familiar with already, and bring it up to the same level. I mean, there may be a few things in the Harmer one that need to be revised and adjusted. My big question, and this is maybe for Christine to present to Matt, is how enforceable is this type of ordinance? Are we going to have success with being able to enforce it? Because it does look pretty strict, and I think the current one we have is fairly strict about street openings. And I don't know, I just want to make sure that it's realistic to enforce before we spend the time and money to change it.
Dave, from my experience in the past, that was the biggest problem that we had when the utility companies would come in. They would very rarely come into the office and get a permit. And that used to, drive me crazy, because we should know who's in our town and who's digging holes and what have you. And we never had a handle on it. And they should be monitored too, whether it's a DPW or the manager, somebody should keep checking on them too.
Well,
So,
no, that's a good point. I mean, it'll take resources, borough resources, whether it's administrative or DPW or some combination to enforce it. So I guess that's why I asked whether it's,
it's doable. It's very doable.
or if it is, let's just think about how we're gonna
Enforce it.
as we come up with it.
I have a
Absolutely.
couple questions. Yeah, we did put that into effect. And you have to come up with someone, like you said, My opinion is the street department should go and monitor them. They're more familiar with the roads and the process and what have you. That's my opinion. Christine, did Oakmont Water pull a permit on Friday for Jones Street?
They did not. They frequently pull their permits after the fact. So if it
That's
doesn't.
fine.
Did they pull the permit though?
Not as of yet. What I'm saying is they frequently pull the permit after they've already done the work. Then they'll send us the permit application and a check.
Well, we need to change it. I mean, unless it's an emergency, then we don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, I mean,
Have
that's all.
strict penalties, have stricter penalties.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing is, are the penalties enforceable? Like if we go after, and maybe that's something for
The
Matt
solicitor.
to review with Craig, but like, if we make this penalties exorbitant, are we gonna be, are they gonna fight that? I mean, we're dealing with the Water Authority, Duquesne Light, People's Gas. I mean, we're dealing with big utility companies that probably have more resources than us.
Here's a good example. Duquesne Light, they put a new pole in at South and Allegheny River Boulevard. And the pole is still, the new pole is, the old pole, I should say, is still there. But it also has the crosswalk, what was it
Sign.
called, sign. But it's blocking, the new pole is blocking it. You can't see it if you're on the
Yeah.
other side of the street. And Matt has contacted them twice, I believe, and also the handicap ramp is dug up and they just have a cone on there and it still isn't done, even though Matt has contacted them twice.
Well, that's when you call the agency and say, hey, listen, we have a violation here.
Well, yeah,
And
so-
it needs to be remedied immediately. I mean, we have to be more forceful. We're a small town and we've been pushed to the side so often.
You say the agency, did you mean BIU? Who did you mean?
Well, BIU could do it. Yeah, if they have more leverage, sure.
well, I mean, I think there's a balance because I don't know. I mean, all that takes time and resources from
Absolutely.
either in our administrative department or DPW. Because both of these, our existing one and the Harmer one, talk about, the engineer or the DPW foreman are authorized to inspect their work and make a determination about whether things were done properly. So it would allow, I mean, it currently allows AJ or his designee in his department to go out and assess what they're doing. So I think the question, I mean, these are all good questions as far as some of the details. I don't know that we need to hash it all out tonight. I think the purpose, if I understand correctly, Christine, was just to decide if this is something we want to pursue updating. And I mean, Rhoda, you're saying you're in favor of that?
Absolutely. And
Um,
she made a comment to have the questions for Matt at the next meeting.
Yeah,
So
Trish.
Joey, I think you said you had them too, right? You have questions.
Yeah,
right?
enforcement will always be part of the problem, but I think the first step is having something clearly in writing. that
Oh,
we can
absolutely.
point to. So I'm
Mhm.
definitely in favor of.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And Sylvia,
Yes.
okay, so I'm hearing, and Joe, you're in favor as well?
Yeah, I wanted to say, I'll email these for sure, but I do want to mention something that was brought up by residents last year that I think needs to be included, and that's the obligation for them to notify residents and businesses that are within proximity
Hmm.
that are affected by traffic pattern or obstruction
Mhm.
to the driveways, the walkways. So that's something we heard and we promised that we would do differently. So I think if we can have it in writing, and it might be in there, I didn't read to see it exactly, but I think it needs to be shared on there. And also surface for surface being corrected. So if someone's gonna dig up grass, they need to put grass back, not gravel. If they're gonna take out concrete, they need to pour concrete, not put stone.
Well,
So I
Ray,
don't know if that's in all the detail of the,
That should be in the
4, 5, 6.
original ordinance
mhm.
Okay,
Yeah.
of 2014.
Yeah, I think there is something. to
Well,
that
we'll put
effect.
this to the test because on Third, near Ray's house, they dug a hole. So let's put this to the test.
Well, they
once we
did
get-
three that one night,
Yeah,
one down
yeah.
on Penn,
Mhm.
Third and Fourth.
Well, let's put it to the test once we get this checked out.
and the other thing was just to show, if this is something that we're arguing 6 months later, 8 months later about quality of work, I think that we don't just need the before pictures, the 3 photographs, but I think we need 3 after photographs from the same
Mhm.
Absolutely.
viewpoint, so that we could just put them on, on file, be done with them. And if something does happen and the surface falls through again, then we can show how it used to be prior to the work. being done.
What's good for documentation, always.
Well, see, in that ordinance of 2014, it should be in there where the street department or the borough manager at the time went up and took, once they pulled a permit, we went up and took a picture of where they're gonna be digging before and then out, after, so we can
Good.
compare it.
Okay.
Well, I know that night up by my house, I know they didn't get a permit because that was at 10 or 11
It was
o'clock.
at
or whatever.
night, yeah.
You know, and I'm sure they come down at, like Christine said, afterwards, next week or so.
Well, one on
And we got to realize too, when we do this, when it comes to paving, winter's not a paving time. So
No.
we might have to watch our times for when the asphalt plants open back up,
Sure.
so we have to realize that too. for
We have
these
to be
companies.
realistic, absolutely. yeah.
Christine, in preparing this with the engineer, can you help us work backwards? If our goal is that an example is coming up on whatever day of construction start, if it has to be posted for 60 or 30 days in advance, can you help us as a council understand when we should have this passed by for this to be enforced for any upcoming summer job?
We need to go over that with Craig. I don't want to speak out of turn tonight on that.
Sure, okay.
So, Vince, did you have anything to add? Are you in favor of pursuing this? Do you have any other comments?
Yes, I'm in favor.
Okay, thanks. So Christine, I think at this point, we're all in favor. Everyone in council has indicated they're in favor of pursuing this. Do you want council members and mayor to send questions to you? And then you'll kind of consolidate that, and if there's any duplicates or anything, and then I guess review them with Matt. Is that what you were thinking of doing?
I mean, that works for me. You can also, I mean, if the list of questions is short, you can just tell me them. And I've kind of documented some of the questions that have been asked, but multiple people may have different questions. So feel free to email them. And then, like you said, I'll consolidate and get them off to Matt so that he knows what's coming at him in case we want to discuss this further at the business meeting when he is here.
Okay, great.
Iron out. And then I'll, in the meantime, also speak with Craig about when this would need to be passed so that we basically hit all the milestones we need to hit to be able to enforce it by June 1st.
Okay, so does anyone else have any questions they want to mention for Christine right now, or you can feel free to email after the meeting, but okay. I think that covers it for that item. The next item, also with Christine, is a request from Chamber of Commerce for Borough of Verona and to enter into a lease agreement for storage facility in the Borough Garage.
Table?
Kevin Ewing called me last week and asked for this to be added as a discussion item. He is asking on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce of Borough of Verona to enter into a lease with the borough so that the chamber can continue to use storage space that's located on the cold side of the borough garage. There on, not Arch, but right there on East Railroad. And so I said I would take it to council for discussion and consideration. And it's up to you all to decide whether or not that's something that the borough would like to do.
I'm gonna go back when this building was sold to the borough. Once we renovated it, the chamber did come to the council back then. Lenny Brennan was the mayor, Rich Miller was on, Tony was on, Fatulis, and several other ones. They asked for a lease of the borough building to put a, I think it's 10 by 15 or 10 by 20, I can't remember what it was, a storage shed, and the board at that time unanimously voted yes, and they weren't going to charge them. So, I mean, this is a new board, so I just wanted to update everybody on that.
Well, you know what? You almost hate to do this because they have been very helpful. Like when we've needed tables and chairs or tents, they've been there. So it's like a little awkward to, I mean, I can understand doing a lease without a monetary amount, you know what I mean? But maybe like an understanding, like, you know, it has to be neat. But they've been very generous to us.
You're
You know.
saying in letting the borough use their materials stored in that space?
Well, no, I'm saying to let the chamber use that space.
Continue to use it.
Oh, you're
With
saying
the-
it's generous to the borough to can let them. continue.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Well, they've been generous to us.
Is
Yeah.
that
Right.
that wooden room back there,
Yeah,
Dave?
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's all they wanna, they don't want it out in the open garage.
No,
They
it
just
just
want-
what's in there.
So
I
it's a
mean,
renewal of-
they've been very generous to
Yeah.
us.
It sounds like over the years. So it's currently being used. They just want it to be
Legalize it.
something that's been agreed upon by new council.
Right,
Yeah.
and maybe, you know, $1 lease a year for maybe 20 years, 25 years, I don't know. I
Well-
mean, the borough or the chamber, I'm on the board. The chamber does do a lot in this town as far as beautification,
Absolutely.
you know, along with the garden club.
well, I think there's a few issues here. I mean, I understand this has been going on for a long time. It does seem very generous. And maybe Christine can speak to this. I think that this is somewhat abnormal compared to other municipalities as far
True.
as letting an outside group use borough DPW garage space. Because I know that there's insurance issues where, you know, no one other than borough staff is supposed to be in that garage.
True.
So if we're allowing an outside group, whether it's chamber, garden club, whoever, to use that space, how are they gonna access their stuff without violating our, you know, liability insurance issues?
What would
And-
be plan B for them? Where else could they store it?
Either that or we come up with a letter of them and saying they will hold the borough not liable for anything. We enter our own
Well,
with somebody from the borough to let us in.
You also got to remember too, and I don't know the legality of it, but it was already voted on back in, I believe, 97, to allow the Chamber of Commerce to utilize that space.
25 years ago.
Mhm.
And if, you know, if it's the wish of the board not to, you know, you're gonna lose a lot of stuff. I mean, you know, the use of the tables, chairs, the tents, because we're gonna end up selling it. because
I don't
we
think
have no-
anybody's looking to say, no, we're not gonna let them use them.
Yeah.
I think we just want to look into, I think they want to look into the liability issues, how we can
Well,
resolve that.
So there's the liability issue, maybe that's overcome, is able to be overcome. The other issue I see is that this, you know, because we've had discussions with the garden club and with other groups and just looking at how do we equitably give resources or space or money or whatever it is, borough resources. This is, you know, all taxpayer funded resources to outside groups. You know, like we don't have any inherent obligation to the chamber.
Mhm.
We have an obligation to, you know, the public as far as DPW and providing a robust public works department. So if there's, you know, if they can use that space for other things, then it's sort of like, well, why are we choosing to allow chamber, but not garden club,
Right,
not
that's
other
not fair.
groups?
You're
So I
right.
feel like it opens the door to other,
Could,
you know,
Yeah,
we could
it
have
does.
community group. I mean, any number of outside groups saying, well, we want to use that
Mhm,
space, or
mhm.
why does chamber get to use it?
Okay.
So I guess.
But
You
like
have a
I
good
said,
point.
though, you'll have to ask Craig on that one because it was voted on 25 years ago, you know, yes on that. Now,
For how long, Dave? For how many years? What was the
It
it was just,
1997.
there was
Just an
no,
ongoing?
yeah, it was ongoing. But what I'm saying is then, you may have to make somebody may have to make a motion to, what would the word be, to discontinue the use of that?
Well,
Because it's already, the motion's already been made, it's already been passed unanimously.
But Dave made a good point, Madeline, or, yeah,
You got it.
yeah.
May I ask?
No, I was gonna say, he made a good point that if we allow them, you know, because the garden club has asked about the baskets and that stuff, and we're discouraging them. So really,
In perpetuity is a long time. So for 25 years ago, a whole other generation,
Right,
2 or 3
right.
ago of councils. I think the whole idea of when we reorganize, when we have new people, but I mean, these things like our official bank is whoever, our official newspaper is whomever, or, you know, as things are updated each year, it's maybe something worth visiting then, but
May I ask a
It's saying that, I
clarifying-
think it's the same idea though, is that you're not gonna be able to give it to who asks first. Because you do have to make sure you have equity in every group, and there's a lot of groups, and I don't want to challenge anyone's intention or efforts, because every group does good in the community. And then you're weighing who does better at some point, and that's, I don't think, fair to a group that's second or third to the ask.
So to the mayor's point, though, we have been doing this for an extended period of time, and I know maybe Christine's best to chime in here. What is our timeline for getting to a place where we're not storing everyone's stuff, where we may consider it, but we're starting kind of from scratch with just the borough's equipment?
We did that in January, I think, where we had, with an instance said by year's end, or, give far advance notice to where it's not now when it's 10 degrees out or wet or snowy.
Was that for everyone or just garden club?
No, it was an instance is what I was saying. So I
Okay.
think that for some of these things, I'd be curious to see what inventory even is, because I know at some point, some communities have where whatever has been provided is actually then granted to the, it's given to the community from the community group. So there's no ownership, there's no storage from a third-party community group. It's been donated on behalf of an organization that's then acknowledged and recognized at whatever event or time it's used.
Yeah, we have to watch because then the chamber can turn around and say, we'll donate it to you.
Well, I think,
And
yeah,
that
I
would
don't
solve the
think
problem.
I mean, I don't think the intention, at least, I don't think there should be any intention to just toss their stuff out and say,
No,
you
no.
figure it out
Yeah.
next week. But I think that, them asking to continue this use, I mean, I know it's been done for many years. And I don't think that, and I appreciate the background that the mayor shared. That's helpful in evaluating this. I don't think that just because council passed something 25 years ago to allow it, it doesn't necessarily mean that we need to continue it in perpetuity. We could opt to continue it as is, or we could opt not to, or I think part of this ties back to the overall, like, what's the policy for deciding how to give out borough resources to outside groups, so it's not just reacting to one instance, it's looking at everyone and trying to be fair to everyone, because I think it's also just us being deliberate rather than just letting it continue as is, just because that's the way it's always been done. Like us making a deliberate decision, putting in writing, hey, this is the policy, whether it's a lease, some kind of lease agreement, which I do think if we did enter some kind of lease agreement to use the storage, I mean, what's a fair price? Because, you're not going to get free storage at the self-storage place down the street. So I don't want it to be seen as council playing favorites to one group or another. That's my opinion, and I'm open to others, but I think,
It's a catch-22.
Well, it's a reciprocated agreement, because it's, you have as a community, the benefit of a community group providing these things forward, but then,
Right.
but it's, we only have so many square feet. We only have so many buildings. We only have so much space. So is there an inventory being liaison chamber, Mayor? Is there an inventory of things that are in the room? Or is there a concern that's timely right now we should understand, or is this just in general?
It's just in general. I mean, we have, we still have a lot. We're actually this spring, we're gonna go in and clean it. We gotta get rid of a lot of stuff from the fall festival yet that we had.
Well, I think
stored
case
in
in
there.
point there, that if somebody were to slip and fall or grab a blade or whatever it is, I don't know what covers that. I think that's probably the main question that solicitor would ask is who can be where, and who's responsible for what. And it might be simply waivers, it might be an easy fix, but I think these are all good discussion versus just signing off for 20 more years for a council we don't know who's going to be here next.
You know what I'm thinking
if
of?
it's-
Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry.
That's right. Even if it's a 1 year or 2 year, if we recognize that with how we have a staggered council now, maybe it's for the next 2 years, we can speak for ourselves and do something or not. But I don't know that an extension beyond the immediate near future would be responsible.
I was gonna say, a lot of times, we're basically talking about chairs and tables. They have those carts. I mean, if we're gonna condense, if you're thinking of condensing, they have those huge carts that, you can stack your chairs or stack your tables. And maybe it wouldn't be as bulky, like right now, you have literally a structure with a door. Maybe, we can,
use them more efficiently.
Yeah, use the space more efficiently, yeah. And I realize there's some tents in there too, but I don't know,
I think it's the capital U in use of space versus the use of space,
right,
for me at least.
yeah. But again, we have to watch because like you said, we're not letting other people, like the flower club and all.
Yeah.
It's
And it
not
wouldn't be
rare.
fair. I mean, you wouldn't
It's
want
not
to do it
fair.
for one group and then have to say no to other
Right.
people
I
because
know
you
it's
run
not
out of
fair.
square footage.
Right, because we've been refused. I mean, I'm on both boards. So
Mhm,
I sit here and I'm not sure how I want to answer this. I'm on chamber and I'm on the flower.
mhm.
Well, we've already been told you cannot put the empty baskets in there. You can't do this. You can't put that in. This is real touchy.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's probably going to be all or nothing,
I think you're right.
really.
So one of the alternatives we had discussed in the past is if Chambers is willing to donate materials to the borough, so that's officially borough property. But I have heard the concern raised that, well, what if the borough decides the next day to then sell it? Is it possible we could think through some sort of agreement that Chambers in that case would have the first option to buy it back or something along those lines to resolve those concerns?
But I think their problem is they don't have a place to put it.
That's
Well,
right.
that
That
may be
seemed
true.
like, I think that's what the main idea was. That's why they always use the garage.
Yeah, none of us
know.
do, Rhoda.
I know, yeah,
None
yeah.
of us have a place, really.
Mhm.
Well,
There's storage facilities.
I mean, we even have somebody on virtual tonight who had a basement full of trash bags collecting for our park bench that literally
Yeah.
took up their basement space to
Oh,
recycle
Really,
and do something
absolutely.
for the community. So we do have limited space. We have a lot of passionate groups and we can't do everything for everybody. Is there something, Christine, that you understand that there's a timeline? Is this simply for workshop for discussion? Like, do we need action now?
We need a decision soon. I mean, I would say probably for next business meeting, because if we are going to enter into an agreement, then we need to draft said agreement and get that going. If we're not going to enter into an agreement, then we need to figure out, well, what's the decision, what's the timeline, et cetera, so that Chamber of Commerce can do what they need to do, based on that decision. So we don't need something tonight, but it is something everybody should really think through, and we'll need a decision next time. Like I said, so we can get back to Kevin and let him know.
I don't want to do a straw vote tonight because I know it's a workshop. We're here for discussion and we're not voting on it, but I would be very comfortable to have an understanding from the solicitor of how we should engage with people in and outside and on and off our property. And then if it's there, it's been there, possibly looking at something on paper for them so they don't have to worry about anything, that the cold storage use of facility that they've had would be good through until next year at this time, because we'd have to look at the use of the space. So it's not like we're adding new people. So my thought would be, if it's move it or lose it, or it's all or nothing, or however you want to say it. I don't know what brought the conversation up, but I don't want to evict a community group from use of space that they've used, but I also don't want to keep adding and adding. So if it is how it is right now, and we give thought to it in the next few months, maybe we could consider the use of the space on paper, so there's no confusion and whether they're getting kicked out or not. And I don't know, I'm not in meetings to know if that's word around town or not.
Well, Joey, we've had a few years, I don't want to be exact because I don't know how many, with Flower Club. Does that mean we get an extension too until we figure out what to do and where to put the stuff?
Well, it's a good question, and probably could first
And we
instance
don't
of
have
now.
a lot. I mean, we
Yeah.
have baskets and you just stack them and maybe a couple small things.
And
It's not like tents and tables and
Yeah.
chairs,
And that's
nothing
the
like that.
paradox. I mean, that is the paradox of extending to one group and doing to others. And that's, two groups right now within a minute, just saying I'd be, okay with considering this. And then it does become more.
Right.
groups.
The
Well-
chamber, once they clean that room, they're not gonna have that much. They'll have the chairs and I believe the tables and the tent.
The tents, yeah, there's a couple tents.
I-
Sylvia, I believe that the Christmas decorations are Chambers also.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Ah,
You're right.
So we got to also think about that, like what Rhoda was saying earlier, is all the stuff that the chamber stores in there are things that are used by the borough of Verona, like tables, chairs, tents, and the Christmas decorations that are hung up throughout our town every year. Those are Chambers, and they store them in our garage. So if they can't store them in our garage, then we very well might not have any Christmas decorations this year put up in town.
I forgot about that. Thank you.
Let me
Vince, for
ask you
bringing
this
that up.
question on, what about the shed up at the Cribbs Field? from RAA.
That's our issue.
I was told only RA is allowed to store stuff in there.
But I'm saying it's on borough property is what I'm
That's
getting
right.
at.
I agree. I feel that if it's on borough property, it's owned by the borough, regardless of who built it or paid for it.
Taxpayer dollars.
It's taxpayer dollars. Yeah.
Well, the shed itself was purchased by RAA, is that?
But
Yeah, the shed itself was purchased by RA, but it's on borough property.
well, the
So
Yeah.
the shed over there was purchased by the chamber. And it's
Exactly.
on borough property.
The
Yeah.
shed over, oh, in the
In the
garage.
garage.
Current use.
Because I was involved in building that. You see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, no, yeah, that's a good, those are all good points. I agree.
Discussion, yeah.
I mean, I think at the very least, if they're gonna use it, if they're gonna continue to use it, I mean, people are talking about chamber accessing that space. And maybe, I mean, maybe we need to check with Craig, but it seems like at the very least, there needs to be some kind of determination on whether a liability waiver or something's needed. Because as I understand, I mean, it's posted on the garage door. No one but employees are supposed to be in that
Correct.
garage. So if,
I mean, even if we write a policy that says if chamber needs something out of their garage, that it is brought out by DPW. That way nobody has to go in the garage.
Well, basically, are we still, because I was doing this too, are we just focusing about the chairs and the tables? Is that the thing that we're
No,
focusing on?
the whole shed in there, the whole storage shed.
Yeah, I know, but what else do they have in there? You said
They got all
some.
the Christmas stuff in there. They got all the flags in there, both American and the veteran flags.
I mean, do we need to
Yeah.
do an
Easter stuff.
inventory of what's there?
I think
so
that's what we
know-
need to do before we start, you know.
Well,
So we
we're,
know what
we're going
else-
over there in, I believe Kevin said April, at this
Can you do
last
that
meeting last
sooner?
week. What's that?
Can you do that sooner? You mean, is April like a reason for April? Can they do it sooner?
Have you ever been over there?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
In the cold? That place is cold.
Yeah, but you're gonna stand there and just take an inventory. You're not gonna,
And
Spend
we're
the
gonna,
whole day
we're gonna
there.
clean everything out and get rid of stuff and what
Oh,
have
okay.
you, then
Okay.
inventory it.
okay.
All right, well, I don't know if we have any kind of decision tonight, but I guess it seems to me, if everyone agrees, that two issues for further research are an inventory of what's there
Mhm.
and liability issues for people that are, right, that are accessing it.
How much does
And then-
space cost, let's say I don't think it's called Atlas anymore, but how much would something like that cost? Would they give us a discount because it's chamber or give the chamber a discount?
So, yeah, they
got it.
got it. You're lucky if they have any empty
Mhm.
spaces.
Yeah, I don't, a space that size could, I mean, it could easily be $100 a month.
Oh, that's not too bad.
I mean,
Dave, what size is that area? From Chambers?
in the garage, I'm not sure offhand.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
I don't mean to drag this out. I didn't mean to drag it up, but
Yeah.
I'm just, yeah.
Can we use this as a part of the infrastructure and asset management committee for us to audit use of space also?
There you go.
Because I know we met last week, was it last week? 2 weeks ago,
Last week.
and we were looking at footprint, we're looking at property, we're looking at equipment. So if this is something that we could tackle as a committee for recommendation to help answer questions,
Mhm.
but I think inventory is definitely a good place to start.
Yeah, I mean,
liability as well, because I don't know that we want to hold a rule and not enforce it, that we have people going through the garage at their leisure when, when it makes sense without permission.
Christine, have you talked to AJ at all about the use of this space or about their needs in the garage in general?
I have not spoken with AJ about this particular use of space. I can, if you'd like me to, I can ask him about that.
Yeah, get his.
Um,
I mean, it probably wouldn't hurt just to weigh with everything else.
Mhm.
Do they have enough space? Do they need more space? What issues are there with continuing to use that space as it is? And then maybe just, again, I don't know if AJ would need to be involved to get an inventory of that, just because, he's one of the people that are authorized to be in there. currently, or,
Maybe his input,
yeah.
how, you know.
I wouldn't think you'd use AJ to inventory the chamber stuff.
Yeah, I mean, he won't know what's in there.
Right.
That's what I was wondering too.
Yeah.
But we do have a couple items part of the Parks and Recreation Board there as well, just FYI.
Oh, do you? Oh, okay.
Movies in the park primarily.
So, all right, so I
See-
think,
Now, we kept our equipment in here when we did movies in the
In
park.
here,
Yeah.
really?
So I mean, there's ways of working everything out if we had to, you know.
so, yeah, so I think, Christine, it sounds like we have a few items for, I guess, research or further information, and maybe that will help us
So,
come to a decision at a future meeting. I don't know what else.
I'll be in touch with AJ and Craig. I mean, Craig has certainly more questions that need asked of him than AJ. And then it sounds like Mayor Chamber is going to be in there when it's slightly warmer out, since the cold side really is more like the frigid side of the garage. And then so this decision might just be tabled for a little while because we won't have the inventory question
okay.
answered for another couple of months. That's what it sounds like to me. Is that an accurate reflection of what you're thinking?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
All right.
I think we can just close it off, that both of these entities are actually doing good for this borough. They're
Absolutely.
part of our borough.
Mhm.
The Flower Club, the Chamber, they're part of us.
Right.
So I think we need to just think long and hard about it, about both.
But if you
And
establish
figure out
policy.
some sort
yeah,
of a solution that makes everybody happy.
I think you need to come up with a policy. This is how it is.
Exactly.
And,
Stick to
grandfather maybe type deal.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I'm not weighing in one way or another on this particular issue. I mean, you're right, Sylvia, the garden club and chamber are part of the community. But also at the same time, we are a government entity
Mhm.
as a borough. We are not, the borough is not the garden club. The borough is not the chamber. The borough is it's simply the borough. It's a local government with elected officials and using taxpayer money. And that's unique to all other groups in this town. So I think I understand what you're saying about them being part of the community and them doing a lot of good, and I agree with that. I just think we also need to be careful about blending in outside groups with the borough as one
That's
bigger entity or umbrella, because we shouldn't be an umbrella for every volunteer group or every nonprofit in the area. I just want to make that distinction just so people are clear, because
Well,
that's,
I
And
do
you're right,
understand.
because
Thank
other
you.
municipalities don't permit that. There's a lot of other municipalities that don't
Yeah.
permit that.
Well, you're gonna have to add in the shed up at Cribbs Field too, as far as the liability.
and Dave, I don't disagree that it opens a can of worms about what we do with all that. But like Ray said, I think we just need an overall
Policy.
policy.
In the sauce. Yum Yum sauce, a ranch.
Jennifer, you're on.
If you're not, those from the public, please mute if you're not.
You should be able to meet them.
Okay.
Yeah.
We need an overall policy, because it does, if we make a decision on this particular issue, then someone else might, RA might come back and say, well, what about our space up there? What about, the rec board space here? There should be deliberate and some consistency in how we handle the different groups. So.
Dave, the rec board and DPW are the only two things that are part of Verona Borough. Christine made that clear a couple meetings.
No, and I agree with that, Vince. That's a good point. I guess I'm just saying that, we need to distinguish between those different groups
Exactly.
and the others, and make it clear what we're doing.
Okay.
So,
All right. With that being
all right, I
said,
think that was a good discussion. I appreciate the feedback from everyone. Next up on your list, Christine, is the LSA grant proposal. This is the local share account. I believe this is a new program.
Great. So local share account is a new bucket of money that just became available about a month ago. Matt sent me an email about this. Some of you may have heard about it as well. The window to apply for money is very small. The applications are due March 15th, so we would need to make some decision about this. And one idea that I'm putting out there to you all for consideration, and Ray, thank you for your suggestion on also adding in a truck, is because we have an old F-550 that's a 2012 vehicle. So you know, it's getting up there in age, and we will need to replace that at some point relatively soon. And that's about $100,000 according to AJ. And then we really need a new leaf vac. AJ was able to find an inventory of equipment that they had done a few years back, and the leaf vac was the piece of equipment that scored the lowest on all ratings there. The leaf box that we're currently using actually belongs to Oakmont. Our leaf box, I guess, deteriorated a few years back, and so we've had that leaf box for a couple of years now. And so to replace the leaf vac with a trailer, a leaf box, and a truck, then we could ask for $175,000. This particular grant does not have a required match, but as per Matt's instructions, communities that do put forth something in a match tend to get more of the money they ask for. So one of the ideas would be to say we would put forth a 10% match, which would be $17,500. And then like basically have the timing be such that we would front the match. And then once we got the new truck, sell the old truck, and then the proceeds from the old truck would basically offset the match that we put forth in this grant, you know, should we get the whole grant amount. It is a 550, and the guys take really good care of the equipment. So we should be able to get more than $17,500 for it, particularly if the used vehicle market remains as strong or even sort of as strong as it is now. So I wanted to put that out there as an option. The other upside of this kind of grant is it doesn't require a whole lot of work from the solicitor or from Matt to engineer a project. This is really about the purchasing of equipment. So pretty straightforward as far as that goes. So I just wanted.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to get your thoughts on that, if that was something you all were interested in, or if you're not interested, do you have some other thing you want to, you know, discuss? But we do need a decision pretty soon, because we'll need to vote on this at a business meeting. One way, I mean, if we're going to proceed with the LSA grant application, we'll need to vote by, you know, next meeting so that the application can be submitted by March 15th.
Christine, you have leaf vac, then trailer. You're talking about the leaf vac comes on its own trailer. Is that what you're saying? Or do they need a new trailer?
I think the idea would be to get a leaf vac on a new trailer. That's my understanding from talking to
They
AJ.
come on a trailer.
And so that's like the
I
whole.
just wanted to see.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, I think this is a good idea. I think given that this, you know, I do think that we should be mindful of grants in general, especially at this point where we have a bunch of grants for capital projects slated for next year that are taking up matches, and there's going to be a considerable amount of money needed for capital. I think we should generally be mindful of grants that pop up and not just try to take a grant that pops up and try to plug it into an area for spending. I think we should try to look at what our needs are and then find opportunities to pay for those needs. But this actually, you know, like Christine mentioned, it is one of the highest priorities on DPW's list. It was in our, last year in our finance and DPW, the former finance and DPW committees, we did come up with a list of priorities for, for council to review as part of the budget for 2022. And we did identify the leaf vac trailer and leaf box, equipment as something that was really pretty badly needed. So I feel like this is an opportunity to knock out something that we already identified as being needed. It's not a stretch at all to say that this is necessary, and it basically would result in, I think it's safe to say that F-550 or the old truck would be able to, selling it would be able to cover the local match. I don't know if you have any other thoughts, Ray, on that.
No, I mean, you just don't know what vehicles go for.
Yeah,
But the way vehicles prices are holding right now. And again, you got a little extra for the Peterbilt too, that we weren't expecting.
yeah,
I think you'd be pretty close to the 1750. Because if you're gonna sell the old F-550 with the snowplow and the salt spreader, because you're getting a new one.
You're gonna probably get between 26 and 32,000 for that truck.
So
yeah.
I think, yeah,
Well,
I think it's a no-brainer.
yeah,
The timing
I
works
agree.
well, because Peterbilt was in the indicator of the market being a good time to sell. We thought we'd get 40, we got 71. I wouldn't want to stutter through essentially getting rid of a 10-year-old truck and acquiring $157,000 worth of other things.
And we paid 90 for it.
So
Yeah,
Yeah, so,
I'm just saying, that was a darn good deal
yeah,
that we got.
So
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, do we want a motion tonight to move forward with this? Does she have more
So-
time?
I don't know that this was on as an action item or as a voting item, so I don't think there's a motion necessary.
I think that has to be done at the next.
Yeah,
I think what Christine's trying to do, find out tonight, do we want to do this or find another project? And
Yeah, is that your intention, Christine, that we would discuss this and just discuss our thoughts, and then we would maybe have a resolution or motion at the business meeting?
That's right. I just sort of wanted to gauge the temperature of the room before, I sent AJ doing official quotes or anything like that. If this was a non-starter or there was some other idea on the table that I was unaware of, I just wanted there to be a discussion, but it sounds like there's support for this particular project because it does check off a bunch of the boxes in terms of things that we need. And there's that potential to offset the local match by selling equipment. I just want to be clear, we cannot sell the truck first because then we would be down to one truck. So this would, like, order of operations, if we got the money, would be get the money, buy the stuff, sell the old truck, and then basically pay ourselves back the local match. Just want to be clear about that. So I'll work on writing up a resolution, and I'll work with Matt on coming up with some, good language for submission for this grant. And then we'll vote on it next time.
Okay. Vince, did you have anything else to add to the discussion?
No, I agree with what everybody's saying.
Okay, thanks. And then the time, Christine, I can't remember if you mentioned the timeline, but I think we were talking that if the grant application is due in mid-March or so, we might not get the results until later, maybe in the fall, even later this year. And then it might not be fully awarded or executed until, a couple months after that. So we are looking at this, taking a bit of time, but, we can also, include this for the 2023 budget if need be, if we need to have a few extra dollars, saved in case we don't get as much on the truck for some reason, but. All right. I think that covers that. Next up, Sylvia Provenza with the upcoming events and community communications.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, everyone. Newsletter first on the agenda. We need everything. The articles, the ads, we have to have them by Tuesday, March 1st. So if you can even get them to us sooner, that would be great, because we'd like to get it to the printer early. We would appreciate if you could get them into us sooner. Chamber of Commerce, the next meeting is going to be on Tuesday, March the 15th. It will be a monthly, also an election of board members meeting. Time will be 7 p.m. and it will be done here in the municipal building. Historical Society meeting will be held on Thursday, March the 17th, here in the municipal building. The presentation will be the 1936 Patrick Day flood, excuse me, St. Patrick's Day flood, with Gary Rogers, and Gary's from the Oakmont Historical Society. It's open to the public, all are welcome, and these meetings are great. I just strongly invite and encourage everybody to come. Twin Borough Ministries, the community dinner will be tomorrow evening from 4:30 to 6:30 here at the Methodist Church. Will be hosted by Longwood of Oakmont. Then Shirley will also have homemade a variety of soups. And if you're interested in ordering soups, you can call her at 412-828-3412. And you can place an order with her. And also an important item, if you know of anyone that is in need of food, please give them Judy Meyer's number at the church. And it's 412-828-7394. And in closing, ALOM, Allegheny League of Municipalities, I got the call today. We are officially a community, I'm sorry.
A
We
banner
are
community.
officially a banner community, and we received congratulations from ALOM. We had turned everything in, but today she said it is totally official. And also, I asked if there was anything else on their agenda, and they are still currently working on the spring conference, which is going to be held at Seven Springs, April 7th through the 10th. And if there are any questions or comments, I'll be glad to take them.
I have a question, Sylvia. So being a banner community, again, that means that we will also have one free scholarship to the borough for someone to attend.
Yes, I had announced that last meeting, and I was going to announce it again closer to the event. Yes, we are able to send one person, and it will not include the hotel or the food, but they're entitled to all the conferences.
Great.
Yeah, one person. If there are no other comments or questions, this concludes my reports, and I thank you.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Next up, we have Vince Floto with Parks and Rec Board bylaws.
Thank you, Mr. President. I believe everybody should have received a copy of the bylaws. And as I said in the last meeting, we have gone over these at length for probably about the last 8 months in the Parks and Recreation Board, and made the necessary language adjustments. And now we just need council's approval to send them to Craig to have a look at and see if they are okay to be submitted.
Okay, I'm a little
So-
confused.
Yeah,
I'm a little.
go
confused.
ahead,
Oh,
Rhoda.
it's okay. You know what, when I had looked at them before, but I didn't really absorb when I was reading. And I actually went through it. Now, this sounds like you're gonna start being in charge of operations. And that's concerning. You know what, I think it could serve a wonderful purpose to be like a liaison with the public and that, but I don't know if you have to be so in depth. Because really, this should be like more of an advisory
Right.
type of scenario. I'm a little confused.
What are you confused? I mean, these bylaws already exist. These are just changes.
Yeah, but the thing is, we already have a committee, for Parks and Recreation. And you do a great job, like, with the Sunday, activities and that stuff. You do the movies in the park and things like that. I don't know, I'm trying to figure out why this is really super necessary. I'm just not getting it.
Rhoda, this already exists. This was approved. These bylaws were approved by council 5 years ago.
So-
Okay, but see, that was 5 years ago. Are we still doing the same scenario? I mean, I think you do a wonderful job just like that, because we have a recreation and community events committee, which you're heading, and you do well managing the parks. You do a wonderful job. I'm just trying to figure out why we actually need to hold on to this.
Well, in order to make the Parks and Recreation Board, you needed bylaws, and that's why we made them 5 years ago.
Okay,
And
Well-
we can't get rid of them.
So Rhoda, do you want to point to a specific section that you feel doesn't match the purpose of the board?
yeah, this is a little, I mean, this is almost saying that you're gonna call the shots with the DPW.
So let's.
What section?
Oh, what section? You know what? I just
let's-
scribbled,
well,
yeah, I'm sorry.
So
go
let's,
ahead.
let's take a step back here
Sure.
because I reviewed this. There's also there's a recreation board ordinance. There's also things called out in the PA Borough Code about rec boards. And so I noticed there's a lot of inconsistencies between the three as far as, I mean, we could get into a lot of this stuff, but I think the overall thing is, like Rhoda kind of mentioned, I understand that a lot of these bylaws were already in place. They're in place now. But there's a lot of things in there when you dig into that and you dig into the ordinance that's on our books, that calls for the rec board to be managing operations. It gives them spending authority, authorization to enter into contracts, get reimbursed for spending. These are a lot of powers reserved for council. So I don't think that there were any ill intentions here. I think that the bylaws maybe, the bylaws that are existing, aren't representative of what the rec board's mission has been and should be. And as I understand it, or as I understood it, is that the Parks and Rec Board's mission is to be an advisory board to council. And so when you look into the DCD handbook for borough councils, it outlines two scenarios for a rec board. One is that in which it's advisory only, one in which that it actually does manage operations. And I think for a borough this size, I just cannot see how managing operations should be or could be part of the rec board's purview and authority, because we don't have a specific parks and recreation staff. It would be getting into collective bargaining agreement. It would be like half the year, council would manage DPW, and the other half the year, council or a borough manager, if we had a borough manager, would manage DPW, and the other half the year, the rec board would. So I think that there's a lot of issues with our current ordinance and our current bylaws, just forgetting all the revisions that were presented. So I think, I mean, the first step to me is, do we all agree that the rec board is advisory in nature? And that's.
Yes, Dave, can I speak on that?
Sure, go for it.
I believe that is why we amended the bylaws in the first place, is because originally 5 years ago, Craig presented us with a generic set of bylaws that were used for most parks and recs throughout the country. And after using and following these bylaws for 5 years, we realized that these are not bylaws for an advisory board. That is why we amended them. So we actually amended them to make it more fitting for an advisory board as to what they were. And that's why I want to move to the next step in this process and ask Craig to take a look at them and make sure that all the amendments we did are in conjunction with an advisory board and not somebody who's going to be able to control DPW or things like that.
Well, so the edits or revisions that I'm seeing in what was distributed, Vince, still show, I mean, it added in, like, for instance, section 601 covers planning, land acquisition, development. The 604 covers getting involved with rec board handling grants and other financial activities. There's talk of it being an umbrella organization for various other groups, creating committees that, the way it's worded for committees is very open-ended. It basically allows anyone outside of the board or the council to be included on a committee. And then having a treasurer. I know the rec board has had a treasurer in the past. I'm just wondering if it's an advisory board that is not handling borough funds,
We talked about
whether
that, yeah.
whether treasurer and anything financial is necessary. And so that's just some of the things in the bylaws, the revised bylaws as presented to council. There's also a whole host of things in the actual ordinance that are different than what's in the bylaws, the current bylaws and the new bylaw or the revised bylaws. So I think that ordinance needs to be revised or repealed and updated with the bylaws. But I mean, my overall comment is that even as it stands now with these revisions, there's still a lot that I feel goes well beyond the authority and powers of an advisory board.
Dave, really quick, did you find the ordinance on Eco 360?
Yeah, it's chapter 10, borough boards and commissions. And so, for example, like 10.8 talks about reimbursing rec board members for expenses. 10.9 talks about appointments, terms, vacancies. There's a lot of conflicts there with the bylaws, the existing bylaws. 10.10 talks about powers and duties, the authority to equip, operate, maintain recreational places, enter contracts, make purchases up to $1,500, which some of our staff members don't even have currently that authority. It talks about financial records, I believe, in 10.11. And then 10.12 talks about establishing positions and hiring employees. So, I mean,
And the word staff is used loosely throughout too, where I'm not clear if it sounds like it's borough. It's all borough. So delegating that much power to a group that should make recommendations. I too would want to see what the solicitor says, because some of these things are a red flag to me that we've overextended and delegated powers to a group that shouldn't yield more power than we have, especially when it comes to budget. I've not seen the books. I don't know what the cost per dollar raised is. I don't know what, all these things that are assumed throughout this, I do have caution with. There's a number of questions I do have, and for it just to be signing off to update, and these are highlighted by color, there's a lot of yellow and there's a lot of green. And from what I understand last time was the green were changes, but I don't see the prior language and then the proposed language. So some of these things, I'd want to know a lot more. But I think the first question to ask is, like was raised earlier, as a council, do we want to delegate this much power to a group, or do we want to hold that within council for us to then have recommendations from the committee as they're set up? Because I agree, I think the committee is doing a great job, and I think that there's no need to overlap with an outside group that holds more power than council itself, with the responsibilities we hold and the limited amount of dollars and resources we do have.
yeah, and to add to that, I'd like to be clear. I see a role both for the Community Events and Recreation Committee and the Parks and Rec Board. I definitely see a role for the Parks and Rec Board. I think they do a lot of great work. I just think that, and I don't think that the bylaws and the current ordinance were set up with any kind of, ill intentions. I think it was maybe an oversight, a mistake by, prior I don't know how it came about because I wasn't here, so I'm not going to speculate, but it seems to me like it was an oversight, like this was language intended for like a city that has a recreation department
Right.
where it's governed by a board that may make those decisions. And so I think we need to step back and start, almost start fresh with, this is an advisory board. If we're all in agreement that it's an advisory
Right,
board, then
right.
I think
Should be, yeah.
we can, that's something that could be crafted to match that and scale it back. And
be right sized. I mean, these are all well intended, but not for a community of our size. I mean, we don't have the capacity to do a lot of these things and the functional of what we're seeing here. And like I said, a lot of this reads ambiguously to me, where the word staff throughout, I think even board, I think staff and board throughout this should be clearly defined, or we'll find ourselves that we're going to be having a subset of council telling us what to do and how to operate versus a recommendation that they've gathered and had a discovery process and make a recommendation. For instance, membership, which is 303, member appointments are the sole prerogative of the appointing authority, which is council. So last meeting, we heard that we have two or three new members, people stepped down, but we didn't appoint anyone, did we? So even as it is standing currently, where Article 3 membership is, I don't know if it's clear that, are they self-appointing or do they make a recommendation and then the council considers and then we officially vote and have people hold title?
The latter.
So, I mean, even last meeting, I think you said, isn't there news to share events? And the event said, yeah, we have a couple changes, and there was like a change up in the roster. So I don't think it needs to be a change up in the roster where groups telling us how they're governing, and then they're holding the person checkbook. I think it needs to be somebody step down, here's our recommendation, would council consider, and then, I mean, that's on page 1. So there's a number of things here where I think that we need to make sure that these things in here are not ambiguous, they're not loose, they're right-sized for our community. And I don't feel comfortable delegating our power to another subgroup of the community, but then also is also adding subgroups within their group. So
Right.
if you take a look at how this tree would work, some of this is based on initiative, some of this is based on the use of the space, and some of this is based on the events. When you take a look at the subsection for officers, you take a look at all the different ways that they have divided themselves, it's confusing to me to what drives it, but you're populating a lot of people that chair something, then have co-chairs, and then work within that group. And then, so you have a large order of people that are providing guidance, or I guess instruction to us how this reads versus us getting a recommendation from them.
And
So I'm seeing subgroups that are based on the property type, by the event type, by the group. I mean, the adoption of a recent group on here, I see where this entity itself should not be, kind of subleasing out who populates within bylaws. This should be a recommendation. And if it's a recommendation, we need to consider this before we grow more groups into something that has the treasurer, finances, and, I don't see books on this. So I don't know, like I said, cost per dollar raised, who's using what, are they using our nonprofit status as a municipality? So this raises a lot of questions that I'm not a solicitor, but I would be very curious to hear their feedback.
I think it's just great that we have the committee because they do everything anyway. I don't know. That's why I'm saying I got confused when I took a serious look at this. I thought, is this really necessary? Because you're doing a beautiful job just as the committee. And then,
Joey, I'm confused. Did you say that they're using our nonprofit status as a community?
No, I'm questioning the idea of how this extends to what degree. And that's just a question in general, just wanting to understand all of these things. I don't know, like with the group, like, are there books that show all the revenue and all the expenses that we're able to see now?
for the rec board?
Yeah.
Well,
The
that's,
treasurer's tracking budget, use of finances, and then there's fundraising. So there's money in and money out.
Well,
yeah, go ahead, Vince.
the rec board technically only runs one fundraiser a year, and that's wrestling.
The rec board hosts wrestling.
The rec board runs wrestling every year.
So I'm looking at Article 4 with officers 401, and then looking at vice chair, and then what other committees may a board have, and I see there's a number of groups on here. And there's a number of initiatives where I I would see as either raising money or spending money. That's where it's unclear, Vince. Just to be clear, that's where I have questions that I would want to better understand it.
Well, can you just put under recreation and community events committee? Can't you throw like wrestling in that? Because it has public events or events for the public. Can you sort of like move that
Yeah,
over?
but that committee is more for writing policy, not for actually throwing events for the public.
Oh, I thought, I'm not understanding that. See, my attitude or my understanding, the Recreation and Community Events Committee, that's, bringing ideas for different activities like you've been doing.
No, the recreation committee never did that. The recreation board did that. They were an advisory board that would advise council on what events to have in the community.
Yeah, but can you make,
From what I understand is the recreation committee is the committee that will write the policies for park rental, street closure, etc.
Yeah,
okay,
but no, I think that's accurate. At least my understanding is what Vince mentioned. But I think this does warrant clarifying for us and the public the role of the various council committees, which we're trying to iron out, and that's a little bit of a work in progress. As
I
well
agree.
as,
I'm not asking for council's approval on these bylaws. I don't want anybody to get confused. I'm asking council to give these bylaws to Craig with their concerns so Craig can look at them, because all the concerns that you guys have raised are valid. And if we give these bylaws to Craig with our concerns, he could say, you know what, I completely agree. Let me come up with a new set of bylaws that are more fitting for an advisory board.
And who's been working on these events? Because you said it's been some time you've been.
All of Parks and Recreation.
yeah, I think I do think we need to clearly define the roles of the council committees as well as the role of the Parks and Rec Board as a advisory board to council. And I think I saw it looked like Christine had a comment, so I want to give her a chance to comment if she has something.
Just a question, as we talked about, fundraising and and I can ask Craig this question, but I was under the impression that the borough was not permitted to fundraise. And if the rec board, which is officially part of the borough, is hosting a fundraiser, I'm curious if we're in some kind of violation there.
Well,
I can say that when we made these bylaws 5 years ago, we raised that question to Craig numerous times, because it is in our original set of bylaws that we, as a Parks and Recreation Board, are allowed to fundraise. And we are actually, as officers, encouraged to fundraise. And we brought that to Craig 5 years ago, and he confirmed it.
well,
We can ask him again, but that was my understanding.
yeah, I think it warrants another look. I mean, I think that's helpful information, Vince, on what was stated before, or what the impressions are going in. I think Christine raises a good point to look at. If the rec board is allowed to do fundraising, I think there needs to be there needs to be careful consideration by council on how the financials with this are dealt with. And I know just in the past is what was done in the past is what's been done. I'm not saying necessarily it's right or wrong, but I think we need to be careful about finances with the rec board, given that they are a group appointed by council, that if given any access or ability to utilize taxpayer dollars creates an accountability issue, because they're not elected by the public. So I just and I'm not the fundraiser thing kind of goes along with that. So I think it's maybe the best path forward is to I don't know, Christine, do you think having Craig look at this from a standpoint of council wanting this to be an advisory board and not have these conflicts between the ordinance and the borough code and the current bylaws, is that probably a good path forward at this point?
I guess what I would say is if the Parks and Rec Board feels that they have done their due diligence in drafting these bylaws through the lens of the Parks and Rec Board being advisory, then like if that's a true statement, then it seems like there's not much left for the Parks and Rec Board to do in terms of further revising these. In that case, we would send it to Craig and let him know that council affirmed that Parks and Rec Board is advisory to council and to please, review the bylaws like through that lens. But if Parks and Rec Board feels that they want or should or could take another pass at them, just with this conversation in mind, then I would say we kick it back to Parks and Rec Board and let that happen. So really it's, Vince, I don't know if you can speak for the board, given that you are.
I can. I mean, I was vice president of the board when we were doing all this back in, 6 months ago. And we did keep reminding ourselves that we are just an advisory board. So we did take that into consideration when we were revising these bylaws. Also, a bit of history is 5 years ago, when we did put these bylaws into effect, I believe that the Parks and Rec Board was created for a couple purposes. One reason was because we were going to enter an intergovernmental agreement with Oakmont for a park supervisor for both towns. And another reason is the town wanted some entity to help bring back things like the Fall Festival, which would be a huge fundraiser for the town of Verona if it was run by an entity like Parks and Rec. So keep that in mind for the fundraising aspect of the Verona Parks and Recreation Board. It was created to try to bring events like the Fall Festival back to Verona.
Thanks for that context, Vince. So it sounds like then, Vince, would you agree that what Christine mentioned, the kind of the first option of that Parks and Rec has given the input, and
yes, that is what I'm presenting, is that we kick these to Craig and have him take a look at it and let us know where to go from there.
Okay. Any other comments on that? Questions? All right. Thanks, everyone.
Do I need to make a motion or?
Not to have, I don't think we need a motion for Craig to have Christine basically work with Craig to review this in light of our conversation.
Okay.
I don't hear any objection. Correct. So.
Yeah, that was all I was bringing up, was just to have Craig look at them, and that's kind of how we did it the first time. We went over Craig gave us bylaws. We went over issues that we had with the wording and the phrasing, and we submitted edits, and then Craig looked at them again and said whether they were feasible or not, and that's how they were drafted 5 years ago. So that's kind of what we were hoping for with the revisions.
So at this point, then the chapter's kind of closed on the group then submitting their suggestion. Council's received it through you, Vince. If Christine has solicitor look at it, then we'll receive it as a full council from solicitor after it takes a look at right sizing for us and understanding the intent that it's advisory, not delegating power. Just to be clear, that's the
Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, and I think, no, this is good to bring this up, Vince, to have council talk about, make sure we're all on the same page about the intent, so that, Craig, when he's reviewing that, can understand that. So, this was good. I think this is a good discussion.
And that's the reason that Parks and Rec has been looking at them, is because for the past 5 years, we've been reading our bylaws and realizing that the way that they're written doesn't seem to be the original intention of how the Parks and Rec Board is supposed to function.
Understood.
My one last question related to this, because it'll impact Craig, is where there are inconsistencies with the borough's own ordinance and these bylaws as written, which set of narrative rules the day? So is he reading the bylaws to make things align with the ordinance? Or are we saying we'll revise the ordinance to be in line with the bylaws?
From what I'm hearing from council is I think they both need adjusted.
Yeah.
Because in the ordinance, it's saying that Parks and Rec has control over staff.
Yeah,
That's
I
not the case.
agree with that. That they both need to be revised to match the intent and the
Be in
the
sync.
overall mission of being advisory and not managing operations.
I agree, Dave.
So
So that means that the review of the bylaws and as written and the ordinance as codified need to both be amended in parallel with each other.
Yes, and they have to function synchronous.
Okay, thank you.
okay, thanks, Christine. The next item again, or the next item is lines for parking on Arch Street between Grant and Fairview along Riverbank Park. Again, Vince Flota will speak on that.
Okay, this was brought up last year about the parking situation on Arch Street down by the pickleball court at Riverbank Park. I believe that council approved lines to be painted for parking down there to help keep from people blocking in people's driveways and just to make it more efficient so we could actually fit more cars down there instead of less cars. I believe that last year there was an issue getting road paint in because of COVID-19. And I just want to make sure that I put this back on council's radar to try to get those lines painted for this spring. And other issues are to become ADA compliant, there is no handicap parking spots down there. So if we do paint parking lines, or when we do paint the parking lines on Arch Street, I would like council to consider telling DPW to at least put one handicap parking spot down there.
So from last year, I think the overall goal I agreed with, but I think when it came to measuring things, which Trish, I went down there with you, the outcome that it actually is, we were going to lose spots. So I consider that council reviews again to make sure that it's not just an overhead map from a website, but that we actually take a look at curb cuts. We look at walking paths to garages. We look at driveway curb cuts. We take a look at rise and run of a ramp. We look at, there's a lot. So Trish and I were there, I think in August or September. We did recommended setback from every intersection, and some of the things that were presented at first, to be honest, were blocking fire hydrants, were not in clearance of intersections and stops. They were blocking in residents into their residences through the, all these things were the intent, well intended, but like the outcome, we would lose spots. So I think
Yes.
from the discussion last year, it was even Vince discussed, considering could we take a look at what the map would look like to do parking on the other side of the street, and then what the setback would then have to change so that the entrance and exit to the park space would be extended so that you have a clear view for strollers and kids and parents. So I wouldn't want to say yes to order paint and then paint from what was presented last year, honestly. If it's something to tackle that, I think the overall question is like, can we find more parking within, the area? I think it's a good question, but from working with Matt as the engineer, we're gonna find ourselves, if we do it on this street or any other street, the more you restrict it, the more you paint it, the less spots you're gonna yield.
Yes, I understand that. My issue is, at least if there are painted parking spots, then people will be aware not to block in people's driveways. So if we lose spots, that's fine, but I would rather lose spots than have people complaining or having a dangerous situation because somebody is blocking someone's driveway. And like I said, the fact that we don't have any handicap parking spots down there.
Yeah, so that one I might agree with, that you could say that we have a designated parking spot for people who have a disability. That maybe we identify, I don't know, 1, 2, 3 spots on a stretch of road for access to a park. That would make sense. Identifying and striping every single parking spot, I don't know that we as a council would want to lose a half to 2/3 of our parking spots we currently have if used at the discretion of somebody that has a station wagon versus a smart car versus a motorcycle versus
Well, if I'm under the understanding right, you can't say, well, we're gonna make them 6 foot or whatever. It's a state mandate on the distance.
Yeah,
So
you paint a line, you measure out so many feet. If anything is
Right.
obstructing that, it's not a spot. Go to the next one. So you're losing a lot.
Right,
If you just let people park themselves and don't block garages and don't, and self-park without measuring out full spots, I think that's where we find ourselves. So it depends on who pulls up and what vehicle at what time, whether there's space or not. And then if you do paint the entrance in and out for a ramp, then, you can't block the ramp. Like that's just it's painted, you can't block that. If it's a fire hydrant, you can't park in front of a fire hydrant. So at that part, it becomes enforcement versus striping and painting to be exaggerating where spots are and are not.
This was also an issue on North Avenue, and because there was so little parking spots, they figured that they would paint lines on North Avenue to help people from taking up 2 or 3 spots. So, and the borough agreed, and I believe put lines on North Avenue for that exact reason.
Yeah, so, that is correct. We did do that on North Avenue. I do think that, and this has come up with other streets since North Avenue was done. It was mentioned in the recent past about Union Street, now mentioned about Arch Street. I just wonder if we hone in on a single street or a single block and devote resources to do that block, for one, I do think that paint is somewhat scarce still and maybe more costly, but it is something that would have to be updated, repainted every so often by DPW, but it also introduces other streets or other people wanting painting done elsewhere. And I think without looking holistically at where are the needs for paint, I don't know. I have a hard time saying, yes, let's go paint Arch Street and continuing what we did on North, because I feel like without looking at the whole borough holistically, we're kind of just picking and choosing. We're just being reactive to whoever squeaks about it. And I think we should be more restrained in how we deploy DPW resources and money for material to do this sort of thing. And I'm not saying it's not warranted in Arch. I mean, maybe there is a need for ADA spots for the park, but I would say, well, let's look at ADA spots for all the parks, whether that's a situation. Are we going to find that we desperately need painting elsewhere? And just making sure that we're allocating our resources fairly. That's my comment. So I don't know if this is something that maybe the one of the committees could look at further, and maybe infrastructure and asset management as a you know, a holistic, I know you guys are doing an inventory of a lot of different things. Maybe looking at this as far as, are there other streets that need, parking
Well,
corral?
I may be mistaken, but wasn't this already approved last year, but it just couldn't be done because we couldn't get the supplies?
It was
Um,
discussed, and I don't know that I said this at public meeting, but Trish and I walked through, we were losing spaces. So I think that the council member who had put it for vote, we voted on it with the intention of growing spots. We were not yielding more, and I think it just halted at that point. Trish, is that correct or
That
fair to
sounds
say?
right. Mhm.
But was it voted on and approved?
I don't recall whether it was or not. I mean, we would have to go back and look at minutes.
Are you aware it is, Vince? Are you referencing that it was?
I'm not 100% sure, but that's,
Because it was on at least 2 public meeting agendas. I remember events that we discussed, but actually being in person and measuring, I think is where I and I didn't bring it up at public meeting then, but at that point we were losing spots and I don't think it was pursued thereafter that I was aware of.
yeah, I might be mistaken, but I thought it was approved. I know that was discussed in more than one meeting. I thought it was approved, but I could be mistaken.
Yeah.
We should probably look into it, and if it was approved, then we should revisit it.
Yeah, and if it
But-
were, I think it's worth, and I wouldn't vote in favor of that myself, but I think that you have a valid point, Vince, to take a look at like the ADA parking and then the ramp and then the painting, like to take a look at specific use to where we would be mindful of who can access the park. But like Dave said, not just that park and hone in on one space, but as a part of all the properties we have is probably a good place to start, but that's what I would be in favor of versus striping Arch Street if it was mentioned 6 months ago.
I do believe we already have an approval for a GTRP grant for $75,000, which will handle the new ramp to make it ADA compliant and the new signage and all that.
So you're saying in addition to identifying a parking spot?
No, for you mentioned the ramp down there. And that ramp is not ADA compliant. So we actually already have approval for, we got approval in 2021 for a GTRP grant with $75,000 with a match of $13,235. And I believe that we're not going to start construction of that grant until the end of this year.
That one was actually kicked to next year because we don't have the local match.
Okay, yeah, next year. Yeah, we have until next year to spend it, correct?
That's my understanding. And so we moved that to 2023 so that we can budget for the match.
Okay. And that's why I brought up the parking lines, because if we are going to do that next year and regrade the ramp, then we're going to have a designated ADA parking spot also.
Okay. Trish, as chair of the infrastructure and asset management committee, I mean, do you feel like that's something your committee could look at and
Mhm.
come up with a recommendation to council?
Yeah, I definitely think that looking at it more holistically is going to take some review and study to make best
Yeah.
recommendations, but it definitely falls within the scope.
Yeah, and I think, I think it's a good place to start. And I think if there's an ADA issue that would tie in with this project where we have the grant in that park, then, you know, maybe looking at that now, you know, is kind of the higher priority. And maybe looking at the rest of the parking issues separately. But I think, yeah, holistically, it may take time, but I think it'll result in a you know, fair, equitable,
It might actually fall into one of the
Usage of
4 ranked
resources.
things that we have as a committee that we're tackling anyways, if we're to look. I haven't looked at it
Yeah.
since last week, but we have all agreed to the ranking and order of what we're doing. That might simply be there already.
One concern I do have is if we're regrading the ramp in the center near the basketball courts, that may affect where we wish to place the ADA parking spot. Because we had discussed, I think, perhaps with Matt putting it at the end where it's flattest.
Yes, I heard that from Matt also. Back by where the sign is on
Right.
the very beginning of the park.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I heard from several people that will probably be the best place for an ADA because that ramp is already graded.
Okay, but Christine, do you know if, would there be engineering involved with this project that the grant, the $75,000 grant is for?
I have not actually seen a scope of work for that. And part of that's because the initial grant application was for significantly more than what we were actually awarded. And that's actually something I put on the agenda for a future workshop as a discussion after I talked to Matt to find out, and maybe it needs to be a business meeting because Matt is there and he's the one that can really speak to this, which kind of violates our whole workshop versus business meeting theory, but he's going to have answers, and we just need to figure out how are we going to pare down the initial scope to fit a budget of 75K. Well, actually like 83 because we have a local match. And then he can answer that about will it require additional engineering.
Okay, because I was just gonna say if it does involve engineering with the grading of the ramp, we may almost want to wait until that is done and looked at before deciding on a parking spot situation for ADA, but okay, so that's something that can be looked at and further researched.
This kind of runs into my next point on here about the upcoming potential DCNR grant for Riverbank Park.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Vince.
And that there is a DCNR grant that is due. I know that our funds are really low this year. It is due by the end of March. I believe April 2nd it's due. And over the last couple years, we've been talking about updates that are needed at Riverbank Park. And recently, there has developed a big crack down the center of the basketball court that is now a big safety issue because it looks like it is starting to turn into a sinkhole, which I actually met with Adam Mattis, who is the guy you talk to from DCNR who does park walkthroughs just to see if your town is even eligible for the grant. And he said that we would be eligible for the grant because the basketball court is in such bad shape. It would need to be resurfaced. It might need to be jackhammered and a drain put in across the 50 or across the mid-court line. Because of where it is located, it is catching a lot of rain and it is probably causing the ground underneath the basketball court to shift. So my next question is, I know that this grant's coming up really fast and it does require a 15% match, I believe. And I know that we don't have that in the budget this year, but regardless, we and Mr. Mattis recommended that we talk to Matt and Senate Engineering and have them go down as soon as possible and look at the basketball court and get an estimate for a repair and maybe ask Matt if a drain does need to be put in. And if it does, then we would have to pursue that grant either in the very near future or next year. So I guess that's what I'm asking is if we could send Matt down to Riverbank Park and have a look at the basketball court. And while he's there, he could provide a scope of work for the new grant amount for the GTRP grant, since it is a less amount than the 150,000 that we originally applied for, since we're only going to get 75 or 83,000, that he could provide a scope of work for the grading of the ramps, and then he could also look at the basketball court and get us an estimate for repair on that.
So, Vince, who is this gentleman, Adam? You mentioned a meeting with him.
Adam Mattis.
Who is that again?
He works for DCNR.
Okay, what was this meeting that he was there a meeting that he was involved with?
Yeah, he wanted to do a park walkthrough to see if we were eligible for a DCNR grant.
Okay. Okay.
Because you can't even apply for this grant unless you get a park walkthrough first for them to designate that your park needs it.
Okay, was this, who was involved with, who, did someone ask him about doing a specific project or?
No, this has been in the works for months, I believe.
Yeah, I'm curious how this came up, or just, I'm confused that how this was initiated.
So I think in context, what happened was Kathy Frankel was our original DCNR rep, and before she
Okay.
retired, she came to do an annual inspection where the ADA lacking was cited.
Okay,
And in the interim, he's not our permanent rep, but he was following up on some things and then suggested the walkthrough to see if we were going to do any more plans.
okay, I got you. Yeah, I was just confused about how that initiated. I don't know if was Christine involved with this at all, or was this before her time, before she started with the borough?
Not with Kathy's. I don't know about Adams.
Okay,
I believe the original DCNR grant request was for a spray park, and that was maybe a year and a half ago.
That's right. There was one.
For budget.
Yeah, Matt and the mayor were working on that. It was for a spray park at one of the parks, and we were going to apply for a DCNR grant for that.
Right, it was for $60,000.
Correct.
I think I had brought it up last year too about possibly doing DCNR planning grant to fall in line with the more planning phase of things we're trying to do to see what we have resources for.
But prior
So-
to the policy, it sounds like, where we're not going to outside entities.
Yeah,
Looking
so-
to spend dollars before we have dollars.
I just, yeah, and I don't want to totally derail the conversation. I want to get back to that, but I just want to mention that we should, for reaching out to DCNR, other outside agencies, we really should be bringing that to all of council and to Christine and going through our borough office to do that. And, just so that we don't have individuals reaching out and expending borough resources or outside agencies resources to go after grants that haven't been authorized by council, or to look for money for projects that haven't been identified by council as, us all being in agreement that that's what we want to spend our resources for. But as far as this, this basketball court, I mean, is it the situation where it's not usable at this point, or is it unsafe at this point?
It's usable, but it's a safety issue. There's literally a 6-inch by 6-inch pothole and it looks like it's sinking in.
So should we look to have DPW close the basketball court?
Why
to the
not
public?
fill it with asphalt?
I think the next step would be to talk to the engineer and see what the best course of action would be.
Well, yeah, I'm not saying we shouldn't do that. I'm just saying if there's a safety hazard in our park, that the first step should be to shut it down so that it's not, so that someone doesn't get injured. I mean, I haven't looked at it, so I don't know, but it's up for discussion, and it almost sounds like it warrants.
Well, we need to, I guess, by committee, look at the inspection of an asset property group of we're literally looking at square footage. So courts, pathways, walkways, parking, all these things are our to-do list. We've only met once so far this year, but basketball courts would fall in that. I mean, also 9 miles of roadway, but if there's an immediate issue, when it gets to be 65, 70 degrees out and it starts to sink more, we don't want to be held liable for something we now know of that we need to be closing.
From my understanding is pathways, fences, and roads are infrastructure, but the basketball court surface, pickleball court surface, playground surface would be under Parks and Recreation.
Well, those would still all be,
We don't have parks.
those are still all assets and infrastructure, so that.
I'm talking about what the state would consider. If you were to get a grant for a Parks and Recreation, you would have to spend that on Parks and Recreation. You can't spend it on infrastructure. And pathways, roads, fences would be considered infrastructure, as opposed to basketball court surface would be strictly Parks and Recreation.
So, yeah, maybe I misunderstood. I thought we were talking about which committee this falls under, but you're talking about which. About.
Yeah, for grant funding.
Okay, well, so. Mayor, you wanted to say
Yeah,
something.
I just want to make a suggestion on the basketball court. Just send the street foreman down to make a decision whether he could throw some cold patch on it for now so they could use it. If not, then just tell them to let me know and I'll shut the basketball court down. Put the lock on it, don't open it.
So I think there's a
One or the
bigger
other.
concern that there may be, that's, correct me if I'm misunderstanding, but there may be something larger happening underneath, like.
Yes, they think that there is shifting of the ground underneath the basketball court, which indicates a bigger problem, and a drain would need to be installed. Because you can put cold patch in there, but it might make the problem worse. And from what my understanding is that this basketball court is so old that it's asphalt, but it's asphalt from 45, 50 years ago. And the asphalt that they use today is not the same types of asphalt that they used back then. So it might not adhere correctly.
Why don't you just send the engineer to make an
Yeah.
assessment?
And that's what I'm asking.
Come
I'm
back and
asking if
forth
we can
here.
send the engineer down.
I'll leave it locked for now and until Matt goes down there, the engineer.
There's also another safety issue that was brought up, and that is both playgrounds at Cribs and Riverbank Park are not mulched with playground mulch, and that is technically not legal. Playground mulch is supposed to be 1 inch by 1 inch square or 2 inch by 2 inch square mulch. And the mulch that is down there now is long shards that look like pencils almost. And that is a very big safety issue. You're not supposed to put that mulch on playgrounds because it could provide issues for puncture wounds when people fall and stuff like that.
I thought that was addressed with
We
Janet last year.
did
That was
have
already
that done.
addressed.
Yeah.
Several years ago.
Mhm.
March
From what Mr. Mattis said is the mulch is new, but they did not install playground mulch. They installed regular landscaping mulch and not playground mulch.
I believe some of it is rubberized up at Cribs.
There's a rubber pad up at Cribs, but
Yeah,
there isn't.
rubber pad.
The wooden wood chips that are up there are not playground grade mulch. They're regular landscaping mulch.
Weren't there specifications when this work was done?
I thought Janet had all that.
I mean, for us now to go back, I mean, whoever the company was, I mean, there had to be specs.
Yeah, the guy was very surprised, and he said that
That'd be
this
another
should be
question.
playground mulch. It should not be this type of mulch that we have in the park.
I think Matt needs to revisit that.
So, okay, so do we agree then that Matt, we want to have Matt take a look at the basketball court and the mulch used at the playgrounds?
Yeah, because I think it's his job to do that,
And
you know.
And I have one more issue with this, and that is the new gate that is installed in the pickleball courts. Since it is installed and there is no walkway leading to it, it is not ADA compliant. And it is creating a slip hazard because behind the pickleball courts in the spring and in the fall, all the grass is getting worn off of it, and it is turning into a slippery, muddy slope that people are sliding in. And a lot of the people that use the pickleball courts are seniors, and it's creating a very dangerous fall hazard for them. So Matt needs to also take a look at that and get us a price on maybe putting a sidewalk back there or regrading it and putting gravel or some sort of solution so it's not a fall hazard.
That's something the street department could do. They've
Yeah.
done it in the past up at Cribs with asphalt.
But you know what too, David, they can just go to Home Depot or Lowe's and get the square, there's cement squares that you can get you know, to,
It's still gotta be dug up and
Process.
flat.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it would need
okay, sure.
regraded because
with
it
gravel,
slopes,
it's cheaper though.
it
than
slopes
cement.
into the pickleball court right now,
Yeah,
so it would
right.
kind of need to be regraded.
Mhm.
I'm gonna pause for a second and jump to item number 14, just get this out of the way. I want to remind everyone from a couple months ago that we're spending it against an approved budget that was very, very slim. And as we do these things, we could go through town with 9 miles of roads and lots of amenities. We will at some point possibly have to say, this is an amenity, not a necessity at some point.
Mhm,
And I
mhm.
hate to say that, but for all the debate and discussion that went on, we don't have dollars to spend on mulch and on basketball courts when we have roads, let alone alleys and other things. So
They need to be
I don't
paved.
want to hinder any progress to make this a better community, but I think at some point, our checkbook is only so deep and we're going to have to give pause to these. Vent safety is a whole other thing. So I don't want to intertwine these things because I think you bring these to our attention. They're known now. We need to address them. But once we address it, I don't think that then qualifies that we put up matching dollars or that because we do one thing, it leads to the next two. So I just want to be very transparent as we do these. We're going to have to start looking at the lines of the budget as we do move forward with some of these.
Oh,
things.
correct. And I'm not saying that we need to fix all these things right now. I'm just asking if Matt or the borough engineer could get on there and get, you know, an assessment of the situation and start getting prices. So we know this year or next year what we're looking at.
Sure, and Vince, that was not pointed to you, that's just council as a whole, that I'm gonna give pause as I'm looking over finance, you know, with the full team here, just so it's not like a rude awakening when we arrive at a couple of no's at some point throughout the year, because there are a number of things that we want to do that we're gonna have to put off to 2023, 2024, or 2025. And they're possibly not even happening this year if they arise short of emergency.
We can
or
create wish
necessity.
lists.
Yes, yes, and I understand the
Exactly.
budget is very lean, and I'm not bringing up new equipment or new, you know, basketball surface or anything. I'm only bringing these up because they are a safety issue, and
And that's
we're talking about people's kids playing on these playgrounds. I don't want to see anybody get stabbed or anything like that.
Understood. I'm a parent of two and I get it. My wife works at the elementary school and uses the playground, so I'm in full favor of safe use of our amenities as well. I'm sorry to jump forward. I'm gonna skip mine later.
So I think the will of council is to have Matt take a look at these, you know, safety issues at Riverbank Park. Christine, do you feel like you have enough information to talk to Matt and give him, pass this on and give him the direction to look at this?
This might also naturally lead into, you know, the other questions for him related to that grant that we do have for next year and how it all ties together and, you know, prioritization.
Yes, and that's why I'm bringing it up, because we do have a grant, and if we need to shuffle things around and use that grant for safety purposes instead of getting new playground equipment, then I think that's what we have to do.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. So the next item Vince has is cafe lights issue at Railroad Park.
This is a quick one. I just, nothing really needs voted on or anything, but the cafe lights were put up about 4 years ago, I believe, Dave, if I can recall. I think 3 or 4 years ago.
You talking to me?
Yeah.
Dave Matlin.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, that sounds roughly correct.
Yeah. So the zip ties are starting to deteriorate, and with the cold weather, they're cracking. And I just wanted to make it aware to all of council that DPW, when the weather breaks, is going to have to get up there and replace all those zip ties before the lights fall down and get damaged. And there was an issue with one of the strings of lights when it gets really cold. I don't know if water got in it or something, but it wasn't switching. It wasn't operating correctly. So, but once it thawed out this last week, it actually started functioning normal. But it's something to keep on our radar, that one of those strings of lights might need to be replaced in the future, and to keep an eye on it.
Okay. I'm sure, well, I'm sure Christine can relay that to DPW crew.
Yeah, I talked to Christine about it already, and it probably shouldn't have even been on the agenda, but that's all I have.
All right, thank you. Next, we have the mayor with a couple of items. The first is a new welcome to Verona sign at 2nd Street on Wildwood.
Yeah, coming down Second Street at the stop sign at Wildwood Avenue, on the right-hand side, I know they were looking to put a welcome to Verona sign there, and I stopped in, it's on the right-hand side if you're sitting at the stop sign. There's a sign on a tree, it says women's volleyball, so it would go in that area there. And I was talking to John, the owner of the Pittsburgh Pickle. He owns all that property, and he is willing to allow the borough to put the sign there. There is a couple of stipulations, but I would like to turn it over to whatever committee that is, that is working on that sign. I mean, I've got my foot in the door, and they can go talk to them.
You have to declare National Pickle Day in Verona.
Exactly. National
Pickle
Pickle
Road.
Road.
I'm not sure who is working on the sign.
Why not?
Project.
Trish is, you're involved in that.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I can go down with me, meet you down there, we go talk to them.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
And the other thing, as far as emergency management goes, I didn't receive anything back from the county yet, so I don't have nothing to report on that right now, which will involve everyone on council.
Okay.
In general, for the sign use, what was it? Do you have any idea?
I'm sorry, what?
Just in general, for them to extend us to be able to put the post in to have a sign posted, what were they asking just in general? Maintenance, electricity,
Maintenance,
lightning?
yeah,
Lighting?
Maintenance,
Of
the
the
street
hillside?
department. And a few other spots going up Second Street, that little patch of grass. But that's all negotiable, we need to talk to him about it. He had brought that up.
So I guess in the spirit of not answering for all of council, it's just discovery process to understand if they're gonna allow the use, we would just find out what's important to them and then we bring it back to all council. and
Right.
find out. Got it.
Fact finding.
That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Next, Joey Warren has approved finance documents now on the website after business meeting.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that everyone saw that on the website. After our public meeting, we do have the finance paperwork that we have discussed and approved as council, and those are just made available. So it's another resource, as we saw at the start of the meeting. Website's being updated and a lot of the content's going to be on there as it wasn't before. So definitely something that's for the positive for our community to be able to see. The next piece I have on here is the purchase card or the P card policy and contract review on the next finance committee agenda. That's our highest of priorities. And Christine actually had some homework she'd done on that. So if she's able to speak to it, she said that she might have an update for the group tonight for the workshop.
So I mean, just briefly, I spoke with S&T Bank about their credit cards because we wanted to transition away from having a debit card to having a credit card anyway. But it turns out that we can get any number of credit cards. So if we wanted, literally one for every employee, with some people having a $50 limit and other people like 5,000 or whatever it may be, we are able to get all those cards, get people's names onto them, designate the amount, like the limit for each of those cards for each of the individuals, and then also view in one location on one portal all of the transactions that would have happened using those credit cards. So it sounds like they don't call them purchasing cards, but they seem to function pretty similarly because this is on the business side of the banking. And so the way that works is the borough actually applies for the credit card or applies for credit. And let's say they give us $100,000 in credit, then we would need to determine if we want to, use all of that credit, and let's just pretend we did, then we would need to allocate the $100,000 among the different credit cards. I don't really think it's $100,000. It's a nice round number. And And so that's one option. And then the other option, I found some literature online, but doesn't look totally up to date, just based on some of the year references. Another option are P cards explicitly through Pliget. And that's another option I should be able to get some information on soon, and pass that along to you, Joey, and the rest of the committee to, think about how we may want to do that.
Okay, well, that was, I think, the next big thing we're going to tackle with Ray and Rhoda. So we're going to take that information. We're going to meet with Christine at the next finance committee meeting in March. We'll provide that to the March workshop, let everyone know what the recommendation is. All of council can take a look at the P-Guard recommendation and hopefully pass this at our first April meeting for us to then have the P-Card pieces in use, ideally. So that's the timeline, just to report back for everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, and then I went over 14, I'll say it again, I'll say it every month, but spending against our approved budget, we're working month to month on these things. So I will just be that nuisance that keeps saying we don't have the money or we do have the money. And I'll just help level set it and move forward. But also as we do this, as we have priorities, we will add them to the budget. We'll make sure that they are prepared for discussion, do some homework, and then we can talk in the fall when we have to take a look at what our new proposed budget will be. Also, when we're at the advantage of selling, like we did last year, a vehicle that we thought we'd get 40, that we'll get $71,000 for, or in the instance of selling the truck we talked about earlier today, and be in the positive with new equipment, and there's something advantageous, we'll be able to navigate those as well, which are to our benefit. And that's all I have.
All right, thank you. Next, we have fundraising efforts for Verona welcome signs. Trish Harzek Showalter.
Yes, thanks, Mr. President. Kind of segueing off of what the mayor said. I just wanted to let everyone know that the Rotary Club is moving forward with purchasing those first 2 signs, which will replace the 2 existing signs that were approved last year on ARB. And we were awarded the opportunity to fundraise at the March bingo at the Eagles. So every Friday in March, if you could consider coming or spread the word, they will be there. I believe it's from 7 to 9. So all the proceeds from that bingo, as well as other things like 50/50 and raffle baskets, will all go towards our lovely new welcome signs. So that is it for that item. If there's no questions, I'll move on to the next item.
Are you officially lead for the sign now moving forward? Because I know Mayor also reported tonight and had somebody reach out to him, but are you officially on this, or how does this work moving forward?
I don't consider myself the official lead. I would consider Jack Pepper the official lead, but he's been working a lot with chambers, so that's the mayor's representation. And-
Just with the Rotary.
Right,
You're right.
he's with the borough.
I mean, on the council side. So, again, great work people are doing, but we as a council, like, just understanding who the lead is, because it was 2 bullets, 2 members, and Mayor, I guess, speaking to the same thing, it sounds like.
Yeah, I don't think we really even put together a person from council to represent council for the signs. I think I just left it up to the Rotary, pulling all the shots, because the chamber did give $2,000. They approved it at the last meeting for the sign.
Well, I'm a member of Rotary. If you want, to use me, that's fine too.
Well,
It's up
that's
to
great.
you, whatever you want to do.
But we should, my personal opinion is we should have some type of liaison, from council with the Rotary.
Mhm,
Well, since you're already a member of Rhoda, that might make more sense.
mhm.
We do a
Sure,
recommendation for
Yeah.
business meeting and.
sure.
Yeah, I mean, it was my understanding it was a Rotary project. They're the ones raising the
And
money.
they are, yeah.
They're the ones with the
Right.
plans and
They
presented.
did come back to us with
council.
the plans and what it looked like. and what we
Yeah,
thought.
so
Sure.
I don't know if,
We're a recipient of those items, though. We're maintaining those. And also, if we're going to be negotiating use of property,
Right.
we need to have someone on our side, I
Right.
think,
yeah,
as a point of contact versus, the Patterson family or the Rotary.
I would think that if there's a point of contact at the borough that this group needs to be making, it should go through the borough office and Christine.
Absolutely.
Because I feel like with different council members and mayor, no offense to any of you,
Mhm.
You might be getting information from the chamber, you might be getting information directly from Rotary.
Mhm.
It just, there's a lot of chances for lines to get crossed and information to get mixed up. So I think
Public
if
Works hours
if
and
there is, if the borough does have a role in this project, then I think it should all, and the Rotary is the lead on it,
Right.
then I think it should go through Christine.
Well,
So should
and I
Christine
do
work with
understand that, but Rhoda does go to the meeting, so she could relay, any information back to Christine.
Again, I can understand where you're coming from. Whatever you decide.
So my update tonight was really just about the fundraising, which I consider sort of like a volunteer
And
effort,
you've,
so.
you've been doing it, connecting
Yeah,
with Jeff
we
Pepper
weren't here
anyway,
last year,
so.
obviously, so, but maybe that's something we can transition.
I
as
think
we
it's a good,
start-
oh, excuse me, go ahead.
Oh, are we saying the same thing? I was gonna say
Yes.
we could transition to Christine once the implementation is actually.
Exactly.
All right, then I'll meet with Christine up at the pickle place and we'll go talk to them.
I think it's good to have one main person. That's what we're heading toward, for Christine to,
I'll get with
Manage
her
it,
and
to
we'll pick a
manage.
day to go up there.
I
Yeah,
think
that
it's
does make
perfect.
more sense. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, and the reason I brought that up is just because, what we've been doing over the last few months is just reminding everyone that the interaction with outside groups, with consultants, that
Sure.
sort of thing, shouldn't be going through individual council members. It should be going through
I agree.
Christine. So I think this makes sense to have that follow that pattern and that model. So
And I agree, I
Um,
agree.
So
Even on the
Chris-
other side, it might be implied that that other person on the other end is like, I talked to council, because they talked to one
Yeah.
person
Exactly,
versus
exactly.
whatever. So
Oh, no,
if-
no, I agree.
If
I
you get a
agree.
lead from someone who's a generous property owner that's grown up here, that has a small business that wants to help and said, yeah, let's talk.
Yeah.
I
Well, that's
think I'm
why I
hearing
went
that-
to see him, because I know him. So Christine, we're going to the pickle factory.
Well, I think from what I'm hearing, it's more of the pickle company can work right with Christine. She can help be, the hub for those things then. So we're not
Absolutely.
negotiating on behalf of, or even if it's implied, negotiating.
or just duplicating efforts.
Yeah.
I
Christine, you unmuted. Did you want to say something?
Just gonna make a joke that I prefer dill to sweet pickles, so I hope they have them.
They got all kinds.
They serve beer there too. Don't spend too long over there.
Yeah, really.
Yikes.
All
Okay,
right.
Let's see. Okay, you're still on.
I'm still
Um,
on, yes.
All right, thanks
So-
for clarity on that.
Is that, did you have anything else, Trish, or did we?
That's all for the fundraising for the welcome signs effort.
Okay.
I had a second agenda item for tonight. I'll try to keep it brief. It's just a brief update on what I'm stealing Joey's term, the discovery phase for the infrastructure and asset audit management committee. So we, as mentioned earlier, met last week, and I apologize to my committee because I meant to send this to you two in advance of tonight, but we definitely wanted to get some consensus from council as to how to best proceed forward with the actual inventorying. Let me take a step over really quick. So obviously, policies are the priority. We have an established priority for those. We completed the emergency rock salt policy last meeting. We are obviously, Christine brought it up earlier tonight, we're all working on pushing forward with the full width paving policy, and capital replacement policy is of a high priority as well, but obviously a longer term project that will rely heavily on the first sheet I had up here, which is completing the inventory asset audit. So borrowing from the list that Dave Matlin provided to us earlier this year, we have audits to complete of various segments of town. Basically, you can think of it as everything we own. So that's under, again, discovery process, the different categories that were bullet points. Next, I have, I just assigned everything a medium priority at this point, but that's open to discussion if some things should be higher priority than other items. And then this is what I particularly wanted everyone's input tonight, which is the resources to complete. Some items we discussed with the committee, such as police resources. I don't think it's appropriate for council to be involved with that. I think that's something that maybe the chief could complete with Christine. But just wanted to get a sense about which resource makes the most sense that we're in agreement on, as well as the priority before moving forward with things like this. So if you keep scrolling over, we have status. Thank you, Dave, for starting the street audit. And we started to brainstorm a few factors to consider. So things for streets and parking lots might include the paint condition of the markings, signage, ceiling, etc. Versus if you scroll down under police, we might want to look at things like the year, make, and model and grade for the police vehicles. So you can see most of the categories. I think there's just parks down here at the bottom. So initial thoughts on priorities. Do any stand out as the higher priority items to tackle first?
I will just say real quick, we gave pause to proceeding, I think, with past councils, it would have been like you going next door,
Yes.
you asking you to ask, like, a lot of like, spread out daisy chain of asks. So I just want to say, I like seeing that we pause here to make sure that we're all on the same page about who we go to for the resources. I just want to say that. As far
Yeah,
as priority too, like the equipment we went through earlier, I'd say, I don't know which one this falls under, which column or which row, but the
Municipal
acquisition of the truck, the salt box, the trailer, those pieces,
Mhm.
just by timeliness, I think would rise as a high priority just because of us being able to use the sale of one piece of equipment to gain almost $200,000 worth of others.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, I think it's important to have inventories. That's what you're making reference,
Inventories, yeah.
yes.
Mhm. Yeah,
because we should know what we have. And I'm sure there's a million duplicated, tools in the garage.
Well,
Mhm.
the police department, every year they have to do a inventory, so they should have it.
There we go.
But yeah, but they
Chiefs-
we need
the
to get it
chiefs
to,
do an inventory every year of every
Right.
bullet. We have everything.
Do
and
you know
that's
what month that
important,
comes through that we can update that we have available to us to know what's there?
right?
This will be
Christine should
helpful
have
when we
that
get
on,
matching grants where it's like, we have a walkie-talkie grant and you pay $10, you get $1 million worth of walkie-talkies. If we know what we have, then we don't have to
exactly.
hesitate on going to see if it's a need or not.
yeah, well, and yeah, and I think
It's important.
I mean, I could almost make the argument that they're all important as far as
Mhm.
priority. I guess the thing is, what's gonna come out of it hopefully is an inventory of our assets and the condition, and then be able to
Exactly.
determine what are the highest priorities. But I guess the other question is, are we gonna have money to devote to a, street paving program or a upgrade of municipal equipment in store, like how that might affect the priority level. I mean, they're all sort of important in a way, but
Prioritize.
yeah,
That's all you
it's,
can do.
I think it's,
And then next month, might have to reprioritize.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, possibly.
well,
Yeah.
I think yeah, I mean, I think it all needs to be done. I don't know.
Right, it definitely all needs to be done. I might suggest then we just kind of work through the order you listed them. And I'll change this first one to high, because also with the completion of the active transportation plan, as well as perhaps BOP, I think the first one, the streets, alleys, sidewalks, and parking lots are important to know for those plans, which should be completed later this year. But definitely all are necessary. So if we just look at those first two items, what do we think would be the most appropriate resource to use to complete? Keep in mind, we want to be conscientious of using staff time, engineering time, et cetera. However, we do want to use them where they do make sense to use them.
Well, on a rainy day, I would think that, the AJ could start doing an inventory. I mean,
He did start on
We
the.
got an email from AJ last week or something, didn't we,
Yes.
on inventory stuff?
Yeah, so he did actually start an inventory for municipal equipment. It's a draft, it's handwritten, but it's something to start with.
Well, I think, I think the information probably has to come from AJ
Mhm.
through Christine, and then it can be put into a format by the committee, however you see fit to organize it and, track it with everything else.
Okay.
I
Sounds good.
think that's pretty straightforward.
okay.
Perfect.
But definitely a shared priority by all council that the committee asks Christine to solicit, like, can you provide these to us?
Mhm.
Now, working with the police chief through mayor then to get their inventory once done, once a year, is that just something we're gonna look to do each year?
Yeah, it's supposed to be done every year, inventory of everything.
Do you know what time of year that is usually?
It's supposed to be done around the first of the year. I guess it really doesn't matter, but I'll talk to him tomorrow to give it to Christine.
Also, the administration also, for
Yep.
the office. I think every department should have an inventory.
Well, it is inventory, the office, everything.
All right, good.
Like Christine's number 4, I guess, municipal equipment and storage. Or maybe not, no, administrative. It's
Administrative,
8.
yep. Uh-huh.
So taking a look at, what administrative needs do we need? I mean, at some point, camera, tripod, laptops, I mean, we're gonna be, getting some of these things and advancing them, so she can, I'm sure, gather that.
Yeah.
Fire, I know Ray had a really good handle on and shared with us.
Yep, we have a good draft of that.
One of the things I do want to mention for parks is that I think that we usually use the term park or, whatever it is. I had thought if we could identify each of our municipal lots and what the condition of the paint stripe lines look like, what ADA accessibility looks like, what the footprint is being used for, and just audit it. So I did request that our committee take a look at that, which we started with just identifying last time we met, but also within, just loosely saying a park. Some of that is like we heard tonight, concrete surface, it's grass surface, it's compliant walkways or not, it's gated or not, it has electricity and water or not. So when we take a look at these, I think it's some of the questions we've asked already also with use of space. If you got a 5-year-old throwing a party and they want to use a space, like what's the space they use? It's not going to be, 4 acres of something. It might be just, a limited use of the space. So parks, I'd be very curious to see as we move on, like identifying a lot more than we traditionally have. The docks, I just know them as the docks, but does everyone know there's parking spots over there? And there's also, whatever else is there, I don't know. That's a good reason for us to audit and see what we have.
That's something you think the committee would do?
Yeah, I think if we go to the end of Arch Street, we see that there's
Okay.
5 parking spots at Arch Street, and then we have,
You're not gonna be able to line nothing down there.
No, not paint and gravel, no. But just to say that there's space down there, just to understand what it is.
What is our space though? We might that might be old Steel City Rowing,
I talked to the gentleman down there.
Own where
The
the
ramp.
dock is straight up into there.
right out to the river.
There's a number of spots. When I first was on council, I was asked to meet with a gentleman who requested to meet with council, and he was very generous with his time, and he said, these are your spots. People can park here. Not everyone knows it though. And it's just, you have the logs up against it, and there's a stretch that you can, I guess, park there. So I think through our process, we'd identify what we have. And as far as that goes, then Chamber can celebrate that we have, however many feet of dock space at our riverfront. We have parking for kayaking or whatever these things are that we could then celebrate. Our business community has 4 municipal lots with over 200 free parking spots. But through the asset management, we'd inventory, and then groups would know that to welcome business, and residents know where they can go, what we have.
Let's put meters up.
Right. The gravel, put a meter up.
Yeah, I mean, as far as resources, I think that the parks, that seems, pretty accessible as far as the committee and even the Parks and Rec Board to look at and inventory and give input on.
Yeah, because they might actually have a lot of those things if we just ask from the group.
Yeah, I would for a lot of this stuff, I would kind of try to shy away from using Matt, just because it could be costly to, he's charging by the hour versus, in-house staff. And, or at least if there are things that Matt needs to give input to clearly identify and delineate so that it's not just this big open-ended research project for him. Again, nothing against Matt, it's just, we agreed to keep the budget tight on engineering this year. So I think we need to be mindful of that.
Totally understood. Yep.
And also the things that are non-existent. So I think that concrete block and movable structure for salt is something that's been more timely also that we could probably take a look at as well to understand if it's an asset that's lacking.
Yeah, now the top one, I don't, as far as evaluating the streets and alleys, I don't know. I mean, that's a big endeavor. I mean, AJ might be the best suited to do that. I know that he may have a lot on his plate, so I don't know that it's going to happen overnight. I think Matt, again, would be it would be costly to have Matt go through and evaluate every street and road for their condition.
Right.
And I think it's something that needs to be done consistently.
But Dave, remember I
So-
gave you a list? I
List.
gave you a list of the alleys and the streets that needed addressing. I
Yeah.
still have that somewhere.
Yeah, no, I remember that.
Yeah, maybe you can give that to AJ and he can make an evaluation. At least it's something to start with.
Can I have a copy?
We,
Sure.
yeah, we have, I mean, we have a list of all the, like every block of every road
Uh-huh.
basically in Verona. So it just, needs to go, like, someone needs to go through and look at that road, look at the condition the pavement's in, look at the traffic volume and fill that all out. So,
So I did mention at the committee meeting that, Dave, you got me hooked on LTAP. They're happy to come in totally free to provide guidance and education and training. So perhaps there's some combination to be found there with LTAP, AJ, the committee.
yeah, I mean, but would LTAP come in and evaluate all of our roads, I guess, like that?
I
That
think
seems
was
like,
one of the questions we had. I don't know if they would do that,
because
but
that seems like, I mean, that's a big, it's a big endeavor.
About the internship program that we were exploring.
so it's kind
For the summer?
Yeah, my only concern there is that it
Outside
probably
funding.
should be someone who has familiarity with roads and repair and maintenance of roads.
My
to-
guess is
to
who
really
plows
assess.
it, sweeps it, has lived here would know that.
Yeah,
So I
if-
do think
if,
AJ is the best person, but if it's collecting data or like taking legal pad notes from driving around and putting them in a document,
Right.
that kind of work might be something you could weigh.
and
For-
maybe we
for
want to
interns.
differentiate.
Yeah,
Maybe we
Yeah.
want to differentiate too between streets and alleys versus sidewalks, because I think sidewalks might be more amenable to, were you suggesting like a volunteer intern perhaps?
Just any part of it.
Yeah.
I do want the feedback of people that are on our streets that know these things that,
Yeah.
the police patrol it, the borough crew works on it. And I think that you wouldn't get that from a student. They don't have the historical knowledge or have driven over it in all 4 seasons.
Right.
But the data being compiled, I think, could be used through an internship program for them to make it a 2022 document. Maybe we can visualize it, we can see it, we can prioritize. it.
yeah, possibly, yeah. Christine, do you have any comments on that or any of the other discussion points on this topic? Just since you see day to day what's going on with DPW and everything else flowing through the office.
Yeah, I feel like we are asking AJ to do a lot. Like in terms of when we think about assets in the borough, most of our assets are sort of infrastructure, not sort of, they are infrastructure or all of the things that get stored in the garages. And so all of that sort of falls under AJ's domain. I'm a little nervous about asking him to do an intensely thorough, I mean, I want the inventory because I love data and like that makes me excited and mapping and all of that. I'm just concerned that we're asking AJ to basically make this his full-time job to inventory these things. So I'm wondering if we need to set some or should set some parameters around, what gets inventoried. Are we inventorying screwdrivers or are we just calling them assorted hand tools and being okay with that? Or is there some threshold that, if an item is less than $200, because they have a lot of stuff over there. So what are the parameters around inventory? And then in terms of the streets and alleys, that's also a huge undertaking that does require some specialized knowledge. And I'm wondering if at least initially it makes sense to say to AJ, like, what are the 20 worst streets in town?
Yeah.
Or the, 5 worst alleys, which, probably gonna get paid with that grant next year when we have the match money. But that could just be, to chunk it a little bit, just so that, maybe it's not such an overwhelming task. It's just a thought, because at the end of the day, even if we have an annual street paving program that, does get funded in 2023, or we manage to get some grant funds for 2023 or 2024, like we need to know where to start, and we're not going to end up, with $500,000 in funding to be able to pave, tons and tons of streets. So to me, it's like, what are the worst ones and start there and sort of maintain that as we move forward and build out the inventory, get it done. But, maybe be a little more realistic with how much time AJ is really going to have to work on these sort of administrative tasks.
Okay, but Christine, he's got two other individuals there
Right.
also. And I think it's important, and this is the best time, is to start readying up that, even for safety features. That's the best time for them to organize, get all the screwdrivers together, put them in a box. Get all the hammers, put them in a box. Because no one has done anything over there from my recollection when I was on council before. So this is a good opportunity to organize and read up for safety also.
Well, as far as doing an inventory, what we do is every year we do an inventory of mainly all the big tools, jackhammers, chainsaws, things like that. How many toolboxes do we have in the shop? I mean, we don't go through every screwdriver or nothing like that, but we take an inventory of all the big equipment. And in doing that, you get organized also.
Well,
You
yeah,
put
because
things
if you
into-
can't find it, they would run to Eilers and buy more. So I'm sure we have quite a few duplicates.
But that's
of a
my
lot of
opinion
things.
as far as that's the way we run.
There's a lot of times I know just from working in a shop,
Right.
tools get missing. I mean, so to inventory every single little screwdriver or whatever, I understand what Rhoda's saying, but I also understand what David's saying.
The bigger stuff.
Yeah,
Mhm.
your air tools,
Chainsaws,
Chainsaws,
lawnmowers, trailers,
yes.
the big stuff.
the little
Yeah.
$2 screwdriver they're gonna buy. I don't know,
But just
Yeah,
keep in mind,
I
there's
agree.
3 working.
I understand.
Yeah.
So Christine, I did have one other quick question for you, which is if you have a sense right now about best practices in other municipalities, or if you would be willing to ask whenever you have interaction with other counterparts.
That's not
Like what they do.
I'm happy to ask other people, what they're doing in their communities with respect to asset management and inventory.
Wait, sorry, Christine, the first part of that, we couldn't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Basically, I don't have that information at the ready. That's not a topic I've discussed with my counterparts in other municipalities, but I'm happy to have those conversations and I can report back.
That would be great. Thank you.
And to be fair, I'd be guarding of their time as well, because I know there's other things they do as well, but I would start at the higher, the leaf box, the salt shed, the bigger equipment, the trailers versus the full inventory itself.
Mhm.
Just like we're approaching like the worst 20 streets kind of a thing versus all 9 miles of roadway.
Mhm.
So even if it's at a high level and they plow through it, and like, that was actually easy, we didn't know we had things, and then they do more. I think a place to start would be, it'd be better than where we are.
yeah, I mean, could you say tools or equipment over $200 value, I don't know, just so you're not, we don't need to inventory every screwdriver.
And we don't want them to have a sense we're micromanaging what's in the toolbox either.
Yeah.
But they
Right.
need to understand, like, we don't know what we need to replace or purchase if we don't know what it is. So it should be to their benefit. So it shouldn't be daunting, and we shouldn't start small. But it should be inclusive of things that we need to know so we can understand if we're needing
Right.
anything.
Right. We can come up with recommendations at our next committee meeting, but I just wanted some input before we move forward. So, thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you. Do you have anything else, Trish, before we move
No,
on?
that's all I have for tonight. Thank
Okay.
you.
Next, Rhoda, there's a proposed resolution to have Verona Police enforce code violations via door hangers.
Yeah, you have it in front of you. The only thing I would probably take off, and we had discussed this with Christine, is about the gutters and the roof drains and things like that.
Right.
That's basically code enforcement, but I think sidewalks, driveways that are unsafe, high grass, weeds, junk cars, and we know there are several there that they could be, I'm sure they pass it every day. And also address identification. We actually, our ordinance has 3 inches, but if we can change it, and we were gonna get together, I was gonna get together with Christine to modify that to have it 4 inches and have it reflecting, because safety wise, when there's an ambulance, trying to find an address, if they're not visibly placed, it's very challenging and time is of the essence. I know doing Meals on Wheels, it's also challenging when I'm looking for an address and nobody has one on their houses. Again, can you take the time and figure it out? Yes, but that's time. So I think we need to enforce that ordinance. Also, about the garbage on property and snow and ice on sidewalks. I think that would be sufficient for the police.
Okay, on the snow and ice, I'm gonna ask the board, I mean, winter's over,
Sure,
hopefully.
sure. Well, he's still St. Patty's Day.
I know,
Still
yeah, I
February.
remember that. As far as removing snow and ice, what are we gonna do about the properties that we maintain that we don't own?
Well, until we get, working on those, because those are on our.
But
agendas
I
for our
mean,
committees,
are
yeah.
we gonna shovel the snow? I need to know. Is my point.
It's a good question.
I mean, we're cutting grass on property we
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
own.
Mhm.
I mean, I think that goes back to the,
I could find the borough, no problem.
Yeah,
But you see my point though?
right.
no, I
right.
see your point. I just don't know if we have a quick and dirty answer, because it goes back to what Christine brought up a couple meetings ago about just overall, what's our policy on using borough resources to
But
maintain?
we cut grass on
I
a
know,
lot of
that's-
these properties that
I'm
are
in the
abandoned.
process with my committee to do policy, but we discussed it.
Okay,
So
and the
that's
other
all.
thing I have on this, I would like it to say, to enforce local ordinance via the use of door hangers, which is more or less, the door hangers are like a courtesy, so to
Mhm.
speak, as a warning. But I would like it to say and or fines,
Okay, use of door hangers and or fines.
because, the door hanger is a courtesy. We don't even have to give a courtesy. We could go right ahead and fine the people.
Mhm.
You see what I'm saying? I just would like to
At the
add,
discretion of the officer, you're saying?
Well,
yeah, sure,
Well-
discretion of the officer.
we should be more consistent with that, because some of them are gonna say, you know what, I don't take the time to do it. You know what I'm saying?
But I think
So-
it should be added on this resolution,
Oh,
fines
it should be,
also.
but I don't think it should be to the police's discretion, like, oh God, should I put a hanger on that? It's either you put the hanger or you don't. They need to put the hanger on. Or
That's fine.
why even have this policy if we're not gonna put the hanger on?
Well, they could get it right into a fine too.
He's just saying go straight to it, just find them. Don't give them a warning because it's just, it is beyond.
That's fine. I mean,
Yeah, all right, yeah, okay.
I mean, doesn't the police normally use their own discretion?
well, when
I
they
mean,
do
we need
traffic
to-
stops, I mean,
Yeah.
they give their discretion.
Yeah, I don't think that we
Alright.
need to dictate how they,
Should we
Right.
spell that out? We have to have it spelled out though, right?
I mean,
The
just for the
discretion of the
enforcement of
officer.
local ordinances, stop, and then you just remove as outlined on door hangers. And not have to add or fine. You just strike that last piece.
Okay, okay, because we have to,
Yeah, enforce local ordinances, yeah.
okay, period,
And
okay.
then I do have a question about junk cars, which is the third one down. That does include in driveways, that does include on street, that
If
includes
they're-
on the grass. It's just disabled vehicles that are described as junk cars within code.
Hey,
Well, with
if
no
they're not
inspection
inspected,
sticker.
Yeah, all those
Yeah.
things. So we've had a number of residents in recent months, not a number, we've had some residents in recent months say that they're seeing vehicles and, if the sticker's good, then the car can park there. If it's not good, though, we need to address that. And if there's disabled vehicles in driveways or on lawns, those can also be ticketed.
well, no,
Correct.
yeah, but
Well, yeah,
Private
on-
driveways would be under BIU's
Right.
jurisdiction to fine. But on the street, a public right of way would be our police.
So just to be clear, the police are then not doing them on driveways. They're not doing them in yards.
Correct.
well, what,
Can I say
I mean-
something?
Yeah,
So I actually talked to Mike of BIU about these door hangers and sort of like what he sees police officers doing in other communities and what makes sense, given that, to be a code, to really enforce local ordinances, you have to be a code enforcement officer. You have to know what you're looking for. And so his recommendation is that the police enforce high grass and weeds, snow and ice on the sidewalks. And if they are going to write up somebody for either of those two things, also look for address identification.
That's it.
And that's it, and leave the other things to code enforcement.
Right.
Oh, that'd be great. How about garbage on property? I mean, are we in the position that we can pay BIU to write a citation? Because for garbage, let's say on sidewalks or in the driveway or whatever.
Well, it is in the Pennsylvania code that the police officers are responsible for borough ordinances.
So what's the big deal of them doing the garbage on property?
Well, we've done it in the past.
I know.
And
you-
if there's a problem, then we turn it over to Mike.
Yeah, my thing is, you're just picking out the 3 out of the whole list.
Yep.
Well, I'm gonna have to add, I would like to add garbage. I mean, they're out there 24/7. I mean, we're pinching pennies.
I mean, we are. I mean, here's the thing, though. We don't have capacity to have BIU do all of this for us, and hence the need to have the police department enforce some of these things. But we also don't have a large police force to necessarily go out and do code enforcement. So like, we're really just under-resourced when it comes to this particular thing. And I think we need to determine, you know, in terms of the police officers' time, is it more important for them to, you know, be looking for junk cars and looking for garbage on property? I mean, I know they're out and driving around, but, you know, I guess I just don't want to stretch them so thin and turn them into code enforcement officers, or further demoralize the force if this is really what we're going to turn their role into.
It's always been their job to do ordinances. It's always been their job. I've been here 32 years. Police department always done the ordinances, high grass, snow removal. I mean, they're the ones driving around. They see it. And if they don't see abandoned cars and what have you, shame on them. That's part of their job.
And to be fair too, I'm hoping we don't have more than a couple dozen of these where it's like, this is a known issue, address it, you do it, and then you move on, because I think you'll check them off after a while, where the word around the neighborhood will be they're ticketing people, move your
Exactly.
vehicle, do your whatever. They're not tolerating trash now.
Exactly.
Police
you don't-
officers are getting out of cars.
And they're meeting people. They get to
Yeah.
talk to people and okay, yes, sir, I'll clean it up. You know, I have no problem with that. We've always done that.
And I think what I'm understanding too is, and I don't want to demoralize anyone either, but like, I think that being out and doing these things will allow people to see, you know, things are getting better, things are getting addressed, things are getting picked up. And if we have more than a couple dozen of these, that's a bigger issue then. And if we're having to get out of the police cars too many hours out of the day, too many days of the week, then that's also an issue. So, you know, then we have a bigger problem that we need to address. But I think it should be start somewhere, and then you're gonna have repeat offenders. You're gonna have a trend of like that same property, that same stretch of road is just not gonna be tolerated, or that, you know, that abandoned vehicle or that pile of trash that doesn't get picked up 1, 2, 3 days after trash day.
I got a motorcycle sitting down there. It's probably been down there since last April down on Lower Sylvan. I mean, they don't see it. Why do I see it?
Well, my thing is the junk cars are what is
Well,
annoying
there
to
was
me.
2 on East Railroad. They finally, you know, put a sticker on it. That's their job. And I give them,
Well, I think it's just gonna set a tone for the community that the council's hearing this, we're enforcing things, we're present now, we're a full-time community, and like, clean up, do your thing, like, everyone take care of your spot, it's fine. And if someone's, you know, down on their luck and they got a flat tire, they, you know, then the police officers should also know that. And, you know, if they need to give leniency, like, I'm waiting a paycheck for something, it's fine. But repeat offenders with trash,
I got a
vehicles
car-
out of sticker, you know, registration for
Right.
6, 7, 8 years.
I got a car on North Avenue. It's been up for I don't know how long. Finally, the chief went and, you know, talked to the person after several complaints. And the kid said, well, I don't have the money to fix it. And it's got Florida plates on it. And it still ain't fixed. It's getting towed tomorrow. I mean, how much, you know what I mean? It should have been dealt with a long time ago, not wait till a group of people, on the street, complain to me.
Well, I'll tell you
Not
something.
Do we need to
Have
make
every
a
right.
motion to approve this, this resolution?
Well,
Workshop for agreement?
yeah, well, we're still tossing around, how many items should they be responsible for?
I have a question on one, although I think a lot of these are good.
Yeah,
The one I have a little question on is the address identification,
Yeah.
changing it to 4-inch. Are we gonna make everybody that has 3-inch change theirs to 4-inch? Am I reading it?
I got a porcelain thing on mine. It's 3 inches
Yeah.
and I
I'm just asking.
no, you know what? Our ordinance has 3 inches.
Right.
Christine had mentioned about the 4. And again, what was our take on the 4 inches? It has to be reflective too. And again, it's like for an ambulance when they're looking
I
for light,
understand
yeah.
what your theory is.
But Christine, what were you saying about the 4 inches? To replace the 3, just the ordinance wise?
The door hangers that we use say that address identification, the letters must be, and numbers must be a minimum of 4-inch reflecting. But when we look at what's in our ordinance, it says 3 inches and on a contrasting background. So like black letters on a white background kind of thing. Our ordinance does not say reflecting. So we just need to be consistent, because if we give somebody a door hanger and then they go to E code 360 and it says something different, like which one do they listen to?
Well, let's stick to the 3 inches,
Yeah.
but reflecting,
Well, I would say that contrasting background does that, because if you get reflective stickers, you get them through 2 snow seasons, you gotta replace them. So it's probably where you find people that have decals that fall off or, degrade in the sunlight. So I think contrasting is probably why that's there.
just leave it go then?
I think so. I mean,
Okay, then
what you
just-
want to address, I think, from what I hear is like, you want a number there.
Right, you have to have a number, yeah. Okay,
I
then
want to bring up one more thing if you're done, Rhoda.
well, let me slip something in. Okay, so we'll stick with the address identification, period. Okay.
It's
go
just
ahead.
enforcement of the current.
The
Correct.
first one, sidewalks and driveways unsafe. I don't think the department should do that. That should go to Mike.
Okay,
They're not,
code enforcers, yeah,
yeah, that should be
But they
under
are.
code enforcement, not ordinance.
okay.
I can agree with that.
Okay, so let's rehash. High grass and weeds, junk cars, address identification, garbage on property, and snow and ice.
Yes, that's what they've always done in the past.
Okay, let me put my little dots on these. Okay, good.
Also,
The-
just a minor edit, it says E code 260 instead of 360. I don't know if that's
Who are
something
you?
that's.
260. Oh, up at the top. Okay, yeah.
It's not gonna make it.
Well, she has to revamp this one. She has to retype this anyway.
I have a suggestion about all of this.
Mhm.
These are very good points. Mayor Dave, do you want to maybe do an article in the newsletter? And let's tell people, this is what we're going to start doing, because the newsletter is going to go out very shortly.
I know, I gotta get something to you.
We actually ran something about the addresses.
Right.
We have done that, but it doesn't hurt to
I
revisit.
mean, maybe just do all this other
Absolutely.
stuff that we've added here. This way,
Absol-
they're not saying, well, you just threw this at us. We don't know anything about it. Nobody told us.
But they should know. I mean,
Well,
The ordinances.
I know, but you know what?
I know, I
If
understand,
they
yes.
see it black on white, I think it hits with a better impact.
Well, we can run this resolution, in a
Right.
nutshell.
But I
Once it
think it'd
gets
be good-
approved.
It doesn't have to be a big article, but
Right.
just something to get the people's attention.
Mhm. Well,
Thank you.
Did you want to vote on this tonight, or do you want her to revamp it first?
Stuff to be revamped.
Yeah, I think maybe
think
at the
it-
regular meeting, we can vote on this.
That was the intent, Christine, to discuss and
Yeah,
revise it for the business meeting.
but are we
Okay, that
all,
was my question earlier.
are we on the same page with the high grass? I mean, the items that we mentioned? Are we okay with all those?
Yeah, well, first, Christine, was that the intent of this? It wasn't, the intent was not to vote on this tonight, correct?
Correct. The intent was really just to discuss, because there are these discrepancies between what's on the door hanger and what's in Eco 360, as well as just a discussion about what really falls under code enforcement versus police officers.
right.
Okay.
Thank you. So, what I have is the one, so basically from this, we're striking sidewalks, driveways.
Correct.
Gutter and roof drains.
Yes,
Everything else is gonna remain.
Well, in the 4 inches business and the
Yeah.
reflecting.
We're gonna leave it at 3 inches.
We'll leave it at 3 because that's what actually the ordinance has
And
right now.
contrasting.
Yeah,
And to be
contrast.
clear, these are already existing ordinances. It's already the enforcement we've had in the past. It's just a reminder to everyone that it's going to be a standard we now hold.
Exact more,
Okay.
exact more, yeah.
So, all right, sounds like we're good on that.
Okay.
All right, we have, so the, the agendas that the council has, Christina, let me know before the meeting that the printed copies you have are the old copies, that they weren't updated for the latest and greatest agenda that was published yesterday. So the next item would be the hiring of a borough administrative assistant. And I think Christina is going to share. Do you have something to share on that, Christine? Okay, she's already.
So do you want me to just read it, Dave?
Sure.
Yeah, so this is a resolution of the Borough of Verona, County of Allegheny, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, to hire Teresa Macioni as the part-time administrative assistant. Whereas the borough wishes to expand its administrative capacity to more effectively deliver services to residents and support council in advancing its goals. And whereas council budgeted for the position as part of the 2022 budget, and therefore be it resolved, the council of the Borough of Verona will hire Ms. Teresa Macioni as budgeted.
Okay, so as we discussed at, and I forget which meeting it was, a couple meetings ago, we advertised for this position. Christine received, I believe it was 12 applications. Is that correct?
That's right. Do you want me to just briefly give the high
Yeah.
overview?
Yeah, if you can, if you have the numbers and everything in front of you.
Sure. So we received 12 applicants, and then because for this kind of position, a resume may not tell the whole story. Each applicant was invited for a 15 to 20 minute conversation, and not all applicants elected to do that. So 8 chose to do it. Then of those 8, it was pretty clear that there was a first tier and a second tier in terms of qualifications. Of the 4 that were in the top tier as being, most qualified and best suited for this position for the borough, one of them withdrew her application for personal reasons. One of them failed to come to the interview, which left 2 people. And all of the top tier applicants were interviewed by Dave Matlin and myself. And so of those 2, both of them were very strong, had great qualifications. And but Teresa seemed to be the better fit at this time. And so there was an executive session last Friday afternoon. And, we put forth a recommendation to council. Council gave its blessing for me to offer the position to her. She accepted the position over the weekend. And so now here we are. We just need the official vote so that she can, be hired and brought on board, to begin working in the administrative office.
All right.
Want a motion?
So, yeah, we will need a motion
I'll make the
to
motion. I'll second it.
pass the resolution to hire Teresa Maciossi as the part-time administrative assistant for the borough. First was by Mrs. Wharf, second by Mrs. Provenza. Any questions or comments?
I have a question.
Sure.
Have we mentioned the start date?
I spoke with her today, and provided there was a vote tonight, then she will be starting on Monday. And there's still a little bit of paperwork she needs to do, like the background check and, some other things that she'll work on this week. And then to start on Monday is the plan.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted that to be announced publicly so everybody could be aware of what's going on.
So I appreciate the process. I know that we met as a council for a personnel issue a while ago. It's been budgeted for. We budgeted for 12 months of this person in the role. We're actually going to be starting with them only being paid for 10 months of the year with their 28th of February start. So good use of budget monies, good pool of candidates, strong recommendation. And I look forward to somebody helping Christine do her job better and assist us and keep us moving forward.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Good work.
I like that we did have a good pool of candidates. I thought, 12 applicants was a pretty healthy number, and they had a wide range of backgrounds and experiences. So, and I know that, from Christine talking with each of the 8 that had a phone call with her, I think that was very productive and helped identify who the strong ones were. So I felt like it was a good process, and I appreciate Christine's diligence and a lot of effort she put into to the process and putting out the advertisement to doing the interviews. But hopefully this will help support her going forward. So if no other comments or questions,
I'm ready, baby.
then all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passed. All right, the last item, and I'll try to keep this brief. I just wanted to talk about the committee priorities regarding policies. Christine is sharing the table or the spreadsheet that we came up with at the last workshop meeting. I think that was a very productive meeting. We basically developed an agenda of policy initiatives, and we kind of worked together to rank them as far as high, medium, or low priority by the numbers 1, 0, 1, 2, or 3. And those policies were assigned to the most relevant committee or committees. And so ideally, the process that we would see, or the workflow for these policies, would be they kind of get developed and researched in committee, brought to council at a workshop for recommendation from the committee for full council discussion. And then if there's agreement and consensus, it would get passed at a future regular business meeting. So I know there may be exceptions to this on smaller items that come up that are maybe more routine or urgent, but this is sort of the typical workflow in making policy that I think other municipalities follow. So what I just wanted to suggest is that kind of going forward, we get like a regular check-in and report to each other on how these are going, what the progress is, what the backlog is looking like, what do the committees need help with? Do they need outside assistance? They need assistance from other committees or other council members. And then what else has come up? Are there things we need to add or remove from this list? Do we need to change our priorities? Because that's bound to happen. And I think that's something not for the committees necessarily to decide, but for all of council to say, yes, there's something urgent that came up last month. We need to fast track it and make that a priority. So I just want to start this sort of feedback accountability loop, just so we all know what we're working on. I know a couple of you gave some updates tonight, which is helpful, I think. So what I'd suggest maybe is for the workshop, we're trying to talk about work in progress items and work through that as a full council. But maybe for the business meeting where we sort of report back to the public on things, that if we could get in the habit of doing like a monthly report on, and it can be brief, just on what the committee is doing as far as these priorities, or maybe focusing on the highest priorities. You can give an update on everything that's something substantial, And then just, if the committee says, hey, we need help with this, or we have questions that maybe, someone else in the council can help with, or if, you're really jammed with something, or if there's something new that comes up that you say, hey, we really need to reprioritize or add something. I think that'd be good, just so we all know what everyone else is doing. It'll report back to the public and show them, hey, this is what we talked about. This is what we said we were gonna do. Again, this should be a live document, so I don't mean for this to be set in stone. If the committee starts looking at it and say, hey, we really think should change this up, that's something we can talk about. So I just wanted to mention that and suggest that we, beginning with the 2 weeks at the business meeting, try to give a brief update, just as a monthly, a regular thing. And I don't want it to be, too cumbersome or too detailed to take up a lot of time, but just so we all know, and so that we can get.
Was this sent out to us?
Chris,
If it wasn't, could it be resent?
yeah, I think Christine has, Christine set it up because she was the one that
I
was.
might have
typing
it
things.
in the file somewhere.
But
I have a copy.
Christine, do you mind sending that out again?
Yeah.
To everyone, or
that an
That'd be
extra?
great.
No,
Thanks,
but you
Dave.
can have it.
Paper
No,
copy.
I'll
for
wait
everyone.
till it comes out.
Okay.
Keep it.
yeah,
I might have got, I don't remember.
I
yeah,
didn't get one.
that's fine.
'Cause she also
So
sent this one.
yeah, so I mean, does that sound good to everyone? Does everyone agree with that approach, or does anyone have any immediate feedback from the last month of committee meetings?
It's been helpful for guidance, because I think it was the first thing I started with was, these are the 25 things that were important. This is the category it fell in. This is the community we are. So I know on here, we tackled 2 already that are now zeros. They're completed. We're working on number 1. It's helpful, but if we were to have this printed in our packet for the business meeting, because it'll be, packet will get a weekend in advance. I think it's good that we recap it, because if it just lives from a January meeting and we don't revisit it, it won't be a good tool, but monthly, I think, is a good place to have it live.
I was just gonna say, I know when we met the other day with Joey and Sylvia, with code enforcement and that stuff, with the unsafe structures and vacant structures, I mean, that was sort of more like code enforcement, where you had it under public safety, and Joey had made a comment to mention it to you. On my list, it's blight of occupied units, which I do have something on that too. But what I'm saying is, I don't want to take away Ray's thunder, with public safety.
Yeah, we have a meeting Monday.
Yeah. And I have information that.
Do
I
we
don't know how
want
to
to do
handle,
that virtually, or do we want to do that here?
whatever you wish.
I don't care.
Yeah,
I think the way I had described it just in conversation was some of the things I saw was divided as public safety, some as community development committee, or whether it was blight and abandonment versus nuisance. So is it a hazard? A smoke and fire alarm going off in a multi-resident unit repeatedly over the course of a couple of
right,
days?
you mentioned that,
Yeah,
yes.
or is it more of a nuisance where it's like, that needs to not be like that, let's tackle it by policy?
Right.
That's how I saw it, but I said that you could probably better answer it.
Yeah, so the intent here, and I think I had talked to Christine about this early on, but I think the intent here was that public safety was looking at vacant and or unsafe structures that are, like a public safety issue.
Sure.
And then the community development is looking at occupied units. So it comes down to, I think the big thing is it comes down to vacant versus occupied
Yeah, okay.
structures. So I mean, we could tweak this if
I just didn't want to take away
feel-
from Ray, yeah.
yeah.
As long as this all gets done, each committee can, overlap.
That was
Okay.
the other thing too that we talked about was the whole idea of the committee is that you do a lot of the homework, but you're making a recommendation. So it's going to live with all council at some point. So if by way there's conversation that's brought as a recommendation and through work with the fire department, like we need to tackle this and consider this, something else, then we'll hit it at some
Okay.
point.
just were the issues.
I'm good.
Yeah, and the committees can collaborate in their meetings and stuff with them being publicly advertised, so. Okay,
Perfect.
all right, well, I appreciate that and the feedback, and I'll look forward to the work, the business meeting, and hopefully we can get this sort of loop going, so we're tracking these things and getting updates, and we can, again, it's kind of a work in progress, so we'll tweak it as we go along, so.
I got one thing if I may, if you're done.
Well, yeah, what's that?
I should have brought it up during parks. Both children's playgrounds will be open during the good weather right now. And I apologize if they weren't open Sunday. I know I had a call on that.
So, well, yeah, so that's a good point.
Just the
Dave,
playgrounds.
I know that came up from a resident
Yeah.
complaint or comment. I got a call about that, but looking at, I had it right here. Where did it go? Looking at our priorities list that was just up on the screen, I mean, we do need a policy for that, a clear policy, and that was something we identified the last workshop meeting for the Recreation and Community Events Committee for a playground opening policy, because I understand the police are maybe getting mixed messages on what to do, what's nice weather, who's defining that? Like, there needs to be a clearly defined policy, whether it's, okay, no snow and ice, over 30 degrees, open the playground, whatever it is. So the committee will have to come up with that and recommend to council.
And if I may, add the pickleball court in too, because we constantly get calls, can you open it? And
Yeah, I mean, and it's gonna be a balance between what is clearly unsafe weather for people to be
Right.
utilizing equipment, and what's, a day like the last couple of days where it's warm and sunny, but it's
Right.
February. Because we have a policy for basically for summertime, but we don't have anything for winter. So we need a comprehensive policy.
Well, in the
on-
meantime, they are going to be open if that's the pleasure of the board. I mean, we do have a lot of nice weather coming up in the 50s and
As long as it's
60s.
safe, I don't have a problem with it.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I brought this up in early January because it had come up in December.
Right.
We need, I mean, I know it's listed as a second level priority, but I think that's something that could be, the committee can come up with pretty quickly, so.
And
Hey,
also,
can I speak on this, please?
Yeah, go for it, Vince.
First of all, I want to thank you, Mayor, for unlocking the parks. And our committee, actually, we meet tomorrow at 6 p.m. I have drafts and rough drafts of all the policies on my list and all the application forms. Our committee hasn't been able to meet because of the way it wasn't advertised last month. So tomorrow will be the first time that the recreation committee has met, and I didn't want to just propose all these rough drafts without first running it through the committee. So by the next business meeting, we'll have some drafts of policies and rental papers that we can present to council.
And by Christine.
Great. Thank you, Vince. Thanks for that update. Yeah, I understand the situation with the meeting,
Yeah, we
how
haven't
it
had a
falls in
public
the month.
safety one either.
So yeah, hopefully the committee can come up with a good recommendation and present it to council at the workshop, and we'll hopefully be able to push it through pretty quickly. Do anything else, Dave? or is
no,
that-
that's it. Thank you.
Okay.
It just slipped my mind.
All right.
Thank you.
Sure. So at this time, council will hear comments from the public. Please approach the podium or raise your virtual hand. Clearly state your name and address and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
All right, looking online, we have nobody with a raised hand at this moment. And we don't have anyone approaching the podium in person either, so
I don't see that there are any public comments at this point.
All right. With that, then I will take a motion to adjourn. All right, first by Mr. Suchovich, second by Ms. Provenza. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passed. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you.